I hear the piper's mournful sound, and feel the earth beneath me pound. The wind it whispers tales of old, of lovers bold and hearts of gold, in moonlit fields where shadows glide. The wildest dreams in me reside. Oh, Persepolis, your walls still cry. The stars above, they watch and sigh. While lovers dance beneath the sky, where silken shadows intertwine. Whispers float like wine so sweet, a heart that beats in ancient streets. The scent of roses fills the night, as fire and soul take flight. Through green and gold the rivers run, the morning light it kisses the sun. But somewhere far beyond the sea, your voice still calls, it's haunting me. In Irish winds and Persian sands, I feel your touch, the warmth of hands. Between the stars, between the sea, a love that's bound eternally. From Coke to Persia, through time we roam, two hearts entwined, one path, one home. The fiddle sings, the setter weeps, where love awakens, never sleeps. The fire burns, the winds may blow, but through it all we will not go. In every step, in every rhyme, you're with me still, across all time. Your walls still cry. The stars above, they watch and sigh. A lover's dance beneath the sky, where silken shadows intertwine. Whispers flow like wine so sweet, a heart that beats in ancient streets. The scent of roses fills the night, as fire and soul take flight. So here we stand where winds may blow.
And welcome back to Digital Dante, and we're going to be going over Canto 27 this week. We got our whole crew here, and this one's going to be a little bit of fun. Unfortunately, we did not get Eucharist because I forgot to send him a message. But on the flip side of that, honestly, if we had Eucharist here, the rest of us would be superfluous, and he'd basically be talking the whole time. So, as much as that would give us all a nice little break of listening to somebody else do this, maybe it's better I did forget. Despy has to sleep at some point tonight.
I would prefer it.
Yeah. Now, where we had left off last week, we are still in the particular circles of hell that are dealing with a level of deception, and the animus that therein is generated, etc. We covered a litany of characters that this applied to, that, at least in my opinion, make zero sense for that to be in that particular circle. But I'm not a 14th century Italian, so yeah, I'll give this one to Alighieri. Now, that being said, everything's lined up on OBS. Yeah, you guys can see that. Alright, so is there anything you guys want to bring up from last week before we move on?
I don't
Not
think
that
so.
I can think of.
You guys just don't think about this in between the freaking recordings, do you?
No,
Not really.
Not at all.
I'm gonna smack you guys one of these days, I swear.
Well, I'm lucky I'm about 3,000 to 5,000 miles away.
And
Yeah.
I'm at least around 1,000, so I'm good.
Yeah, you guys say that. I once literally drove from South Florida up to I-10 over to San Diego, got out of my car, got onto an old motorcycle with a sidecar, put a fucking surfboard in the sidecar, and then rode all the way down to fucking Cabo, down on the tip of fucking Baja, because somebody told me I wouldn't do it.
Well, I mean, the past tense of that story belies, well, not belies, but suggests that it happened quite a long time ago when you were a fair bit younger. So,
Oh yeah.
Just...
Now I have a car with comfortable seats.
Fair enough. Hey, if you want to come find me, that's on you.
No, not
you. Do you, my
but,
friend?
But the flip side is, I'll remember this. You guys will probably forget this conversation in 2 weeks.
I mean, yeah, very likely.
So then when you come for the barbecue, you will have brought the smacking all the way to me, and then I can just do it without having to leave my house.
I mean, if in fact I do get to come to the barbecue, sure.
Yeah. I mean, of course you got to get the food. Yeah, I'm not a monster. Oh no, that being said.
Well, if you were to do that here, you'd be solving a problem for me. You'd be going home with a puppy.
Give it time. You haven't had her that long. It takes a while. If you saw how wild Barbie was when we first got her to where she is now, that's months and months. She's not a full-grown dog yet. It takes a while. You basically have an unruly teenager right now.
I don't think she's close to teenage yet. She's only 4 months old.
No. But remember, for us, a teenager, the growing to adulthood, their growth to adulthood is a year to like 18 months, depending on the breed. So you get the toddler to fucking graduation all crammed into a year.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. 4 months.
Yeah, it'll be about a year old before she really starts to settle down completely, and you know her full personality as a dog. It just is what it is. But considering I already have one hellion dog in the house and 4 cats, I think my wife would kill me if I brought Trixie home.
Yeah.
And I think that if I were to bring Trixie home, Wei Yun would bully the shit out of her.
Yeah, it could be.
And, it doesn't matter that she'll probably end up being bigger than him. He has the personality of a dog 3 times his size.
Yeah, so does she.
I mean, you named him appropriately.
Yeah,
then.
the only dogs that can fight a corgi are another corgi. That's that. It's wild.
No, you just need another lowrider. That's all you need.
Well,
lowriders
fine.
fight lowriders.
Yeah, fine. A dachshund could probably do it, or maybe a Boston Terrier. But corgis are fucking. They have the confidence, the unearned confidence of a cis straight white man. That is what a corgi is.
Well, I mean, you're talking about, if I'm remembering corgis correctly, literally a breed that was crafted for royalty. So yeah, this tracks.
Well, no, that I don't think they were crafted for royalty. I think Elizabeth
at the
just
history.
had a particular
No,
obsession with them.
no, I'm talking way.
Corgis are
way
cattle
back.
dogs.
I'd have to look.
Corgis were bred to be cattle dogs.
Yeah, I thought it was warden dogs for forestry, poachers, things like that. Not originally cattle that came later.
My understanding is they were bred specifically to be so short that they could easily weave in and out of cattle legs, so they could herd them. They were bred to be herding dogs.
I suppose.
It depends on the animal. Like which animal are they herding?
That's exactly what Trixie
cattle.
does, by the way.
But cattle is
yourself between my legs so that I can't get through a door and leave her on the other side.
Herding goats is a lot different than herding cows.
Yes, I'm saying they were
Both are
cattle herding dogs.
Yeah, both are
Yes,
cattle.
Both are cattle.
No, goats are goats, cattle are cattle is the species term for cows and steers.
No. That's bovine.
Yeah.
Cattle is a industry term for a particular group of herdsman animals. And then you have what's the one for sheep? Because that's not livestock for the other one.
I thought livestock was generic for all of them.
Yeah, that is where you put everything that's not cattle.
Yeah,
and goats are cattle, and what's the other one? Ox are cattle. There's a few others.
Okay, my spouse just entered the room and told me that corgis were bred to be so short so that when cows kick, it goes over their heads.
Okay, I mean that's not a history that I remember hearing, but maybe Westminster Dog Show lied to me.
All I'm gonna say is you can lay on the ground and a cow can kick you.
Yeah,
I've seen it happen. I've had it happen to me.
Yeah, I mean, I have the sneaky suspicion even that line is a little bit of the myth, even if that is what is the history of the corgi. Just like the reason that we bred the Rhodesian Ridgeback in Africa was to fight lions. No, we bred them to be guard dogs. We didn't give a fuck who the hell they guard people from. They just happened to be really effective at freaking out lions for some reason.
I asked my spouse, and they've never heard of anyone referring to goats as cattle, and the research I can find just that no, cattle only refers to bovine animals.
I'm sure all of the herdsmen for multiple millennia would love to have an argument with Webster over that, but the Webster go through like the historical record, go through Farmer's Almanac, go through this has been, at least for many hundred years, this has been the norm. And every country will modify what goes in and what goes out, but yeah, it's always been a group of animals, not just cows.
I guess maybe
what was
cattle
the other
being
one?
Specifically, well, see, I don't like saying cows because cows are specifically the female of the species. So
I know.
Yeah.
Well, that's why most people, if they're talking in a more clinical sense, they just say bovines or bovids.
But what I will tell you is that when it actually comes to when we're actually talking like beef cattle, like the majority of cows are the ones that we actually eat. It's actually like the bulls that are less tasty when it comes to like cuts of meat. So
depends on the cut, but yes, almost exclusively this is true. Yeah. Like the only thing that this isn't true of is the backstrap, and that's because bulls get more fat in their backstrap than a cow does for some reason.
Correct.
I don't understand why, but yeah, other than that, that is the only cut of meat on a bull that's better.
Well, unless you like Rocky Mountain oysters.
No, thanks. I don't. And anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, don't Google it. You don't want that in your search engine. Let's just say fear factor, and you should get enough of the message.
I think
Oh
the
wait,
reason
anybody
why
who's
people put
who's
goats-
watching this for university is too young for Fear Factor. What's the show on
I think
YouTube
when
that they eat gross shit now? Go ahead,
Mr.
Chris,
Beast?
sorry. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
All
No,
of
what I was gonna say is that what is it when they're talking about cattle? It's usually domestic or livestock that's domesticated for meat or milk, which is why I said goats or cattle.
Hmm. Now, like from the etymology of the word cattle, I do see that like it was previously used as such, but like it looks like in at least common modern usage, it only refers to bovines.
Common modern usage to non-farmers.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
That's the
most
difference
people
here.
aren't farmers.
Yeah, but we literally have a farmer in here and somebody who has bought meat from farmers.
Fair enough, but I was using it in the colloquial sense, so
Yeah, but to us, that's kind of my point. Is to a chef or a farmer, that is the colloquial sense. Like if we are ordering it, it will be in the cattle area of our wholesale mags and shit. Well, we don't. I'm guessing they don't do
Hey,
mags anymore. It's
I
all
don't-
website, but still.
It doesn't bother me if people use the word Hercule or not, so it's all good.
Well, but it's also like as Rich and I are wont to argue in our group chat. Language is to a point our playground, and while I am very proscriptive in some of my argumentation for language, I am not a prescriptivist. It is a descriptivist nature, and therefore the majority of people who use this and an everyday basis are going to be farmers. The colloquial sense is based on that, not the people who don't use it, except for in the odd case you ask them about a cow.
Yeah. It's like, well, someone says, "What do you do?" It's like, "I raise cattle." What kind of cattle you have? Well, we got some sheep, we got some cows, we got a few goats, we got
Oh yeah,
cattle. Cattle
that's
is
right.
used in that sense there.
Llama was the other one I was trying
Yeah.
to think of because they fucking consider that cattle. Llama and camel are considered it. Not here in the States, by the way. We're talking
Yep.
Near East, North Africa, Asia, etc., where the camelids are naturally propagated.
But that has nothing to do with corgis because corgis would
No.
not have been associated with those.
No, but yeah, that's how we got off on this tangent. But
Yep.
like I said, I remember watching Westminster years ago, and they said something about it was for catching poachers outside of the woods. It was done by the aristocracy of the time, and it was laterally adapted. When basically the breed gets out. Greyhounds were royalty dogs, but by the time 1,000 years had passed, greyhounds were no longer the province of the royals. Just as an example, and that was. I think we remember looking this up week 2 or week 3. That was 6,000 BCE. We're not talking recent memory here. This is old shit. Now, corgis aren't that old. I think they're, 11th century, 12th century, something like that? It's not been that long.
I'm seeing they first came around they first started appearing in Wales around the 10th century. Having
so
come
I was one off. Yeah,
ha-
I was close.
Yeah, having come from like Nordic Swedish herding dogs. So
Yeah.
that's yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's-
I guess in the case of corgis, they were generic cattle herding dogs, so not just cows. It looks like.
Well, and I'm gonna tell you, if you've ever been to the fjords of fucking Scandinavia, I've seen a lot of goats herded over there. I've seen a lot of sheep herded over there. I haven't seen a whole lot of fucking cows herded on those fucking steep ass cliff sides.
Yeah.
Just saying. I could be wrong, but maybe we're gonna get a comment from some Swedish guy who's like, no, we herd cows, we just keep them away from the edge. But like, I've only been there a few times, but like everywhere I went looked like an ankle breaker for anything but the sturdiest horse. or the absolute biggest goddamn ox I had ever seen. It's just little ruts and little twists and little like hard packs, and followed by soft peat, followed by moss. Like, you cannot walk through that area and be unfamiliar with the terrain and do it quickly. You're not going to be able to do it. And that many ankle breakers, I wouldn't want to be riding a horse, let alone fucking trying to herd cows.
Sure.
Now, that being said, let's get to the reading, because we are now been going live for 38 minutes.
Okay, but I had a quick question. What?
Oh, go ahead.
There's a footnote. If you look in Moose's footnotes, which you can get to on the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I just don't open it while I'm live.
By clicking on it. The last footnote doesn't attach to a particular verse. So I don't know where to put it. I think maybe just put it either at the very end on the last cell, or at the very top, like where the introductory.
Is the footnote context specific?
It is.
Well, then just hyperlink it to the context that it's specific to of the canto. That's what
it's specific to a large portion of the canto.
Yeah,
are you talking about the bit in the notes that starts in the final note of Canto 26?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just for the entire canto, so I would put that as the note for, like, put it on the cell that says Musa.
Yeah, that's where I put it. I just didn't know if that was enough. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, as long as it's there. See, what I would have done is if it was
I've got all the
just
notes. It's ready to go.
All right. So, as we are getting into this, we are getting out of a darker area of or a more strobing area, as I kind of envision it, of this particular Bolgia, where the snakes and all that were causing the inverse phoenix cycle that we were seeing, to where now we are actually starting to get into more of the last lit area before we start descending towards Cocytus. We are going to get to where this is more fiery. This is when people envision hell, they envision very much what Milton and many like Milton have portrayed since. And this is kind of where that comes from. The fiery, burny, very Hades-esque version of hell is what we find in this particular area. I don't understand the significance of why this area directly precedes the frozen wastes of Cocytus. However, it does seem to be significant that Dante has been putting us through this cycle of light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. And he hasn't done hot, cold as heavily. It's more been windy or an absence of environmental, like temperature adjectives within the cantos, as opposed to any specific cycle there. It's mainly been light and dark. And in the final circle, as anybody who has read this before knows, we get to a frozen lake. I don't know what significance it has a 14th century theologian, scholar, whatever the hell you want to call Alighieri, because he holds so many titles. But I noticed that anywhere I've looked up this question, and I've looked in every place I could find, from university websites, etc., it's not highly talked about, and any place it is talked about, nobody fucking agrees on it. So I don't know, like, what the hell this means, because there is no, like, general consensus and scholarship on this, because it's kind of like a niche partition of scholarship on it. That being said, Despy, would you like to pick up the reading? That way we'll get to...
Sure.
We'll get you going a little bit quicker this week, so that when we get towards the end, you're not as rearing to go.
Yep. Okay, so here we go.
Hold on. Let me move this
Already
up
was
just
the
a
flame
little bit.
erect and quiet, to speak no more, and now it departed from us, with the permission of the gentle poet. When yet another, which behind it came, caused us to turn our eyes upon its top by a confused sound that issued from it. As a Sicilian bull that bellowed first with the lament of him, and that was right, who with his file had modulated it, bellowed so with the voice of the afflicted, that notwithstanding it was made of brass, still it appeared with agony transfixed. Thus, by not having any way or issue, at first from out of the fire, to its own language converted were the melancholy words. But afterwards, when they had gathered way up through the point, giving it that vibration, the tongue had given them in their passage out. We heard it said, O thou at whom I aim my voice, and who by now wast speaking Lombard, saying, now go thy way, no more I urge thee. Is that where I was supposed to stop?
No, one more.
Okay, because I come perchance a little late, to stay and speak with me, let it not irk thee. Thou seest it irks not me, and I am burning.
Okay, so first of all,
Lombard just means Italian. He's speaking
yes.
Italian.
Well, not quite Italian, but what most people would understand as Italian, the main boot of Italy would be the Kingdom of Lombard. And that was what I was going to point out as well. This is a particular portion of the Kingdom of Lombardy. It was most of the boot, with the exception of Sicily, Sardinia, and a few of the islands, and most of the Alpine range of Italy was excluded from this, just because it's really fucking hard in these time periods to fucking do a campaign through mountains. Just ask anybody until modern times how fun it is to try and push through mountains. Yeah, so like this is the geographical barrier that prevented them from getting all of what we now know as Italy. And if you were to refine this down to what you might hear today, this would be most reminiscent or most reflected still today in the not the Anatolia, God, I can't remember the name. It's just south of Tuscany. I just can't remember the name of the fucking region right now. But it's right there on the east coast of Italy, along there, just south of the Tuscan area. And the reason for this is that was as the Kingdom of Lombardy was shrinking because of other kingdoms rising and lateral consolation into what we now know as Italy. The Kingdom of Lombardy shrunk towards that region. So if you have ever been to that area, you have heard a more modern version of what they are talking about here. Beyond that, this was just a really, really poetic way of saying, hey, this doesn't bother me. Like, if you, like, going all the way back, like, this is really just a really long-winded, this doesn't bother me, bro. And that, I don't get the significance other than the machismo, which, obviously, there's, cultural reasons for that at this time period. But at the same thing, I don't understand the inclusion from Dante. I've read the commentary.
Still hear you. I'll be right back.
Yep. And you're welcome for the lament.
Thank you.
Now,
say that again. What inclusion do you not understand?
The fact that this is basically a giant, this doesn't bother me. This is a flex of machismo for multiple tercets that does not seem to be relevant to the story beyond setting like who we might be speaking to. Like, it just seems like overinflated, and that's unlike Dante.
Are we going to talk about the Sicilian bull?
If you would like, yes, that's part of what we just went over.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's a torture device, right?
Yes.
So
Wait, hold on. If I'm remembering correctly, yes, that there was another bull that we may be confusing it with that was from Greece that was also like a torture device. Maybe that's what it is. Let me double check just to be sure.
I mean, I'm just reading Moose's notes, and he says that
Oh, okay.
he's being tortured with the very torture device that he himself invented.
Ah, okay.
And it's
Well,
hard
okay.
for me to see the bull as, because it's a bronze, it's made out of bronze. So I'm thinking of the bull, in New York, the big
Mhm.
the bull symbol for the stock market or whatever.
Oh
Imagine
God, what's it
somebody being
called?
inside of it. And so when he talks, it vibrates like a bell because bells are made out of brass or whatever.
Well, no, it vibrates like a horn. And like I said, this is if this is true, this is also very similar to the Greek one, and I think it was brass in that case. But the whole point is you are inside, and your whales, as put through these tubes from
Yeah.
the area that you are in, come out and sound like the sound of a raging bull. Yeah. It's barbaric and fucked up. And as far as I know, and granted, I have not dug too deep into this, but at least from the few things I've seen, like documentaries that talk about like ancient Greece and ancient Rome, nobody was ever actually put in one of these. It was basically like a fucking like showpiece, but like that could just be they didn't record it. That's also possible, or that those records were lost to history as well. So it's just, I just remember, oh God, who was it? Doctor, fucking British guy, starts with a J. I'll remember it later. He did a documentary on ITV years ago about it, and I just remember him saying that nobody had ever actually been put into it. But
Well, apparently he's in it.
good.
That's his contrapasso, is that he's in it.
Oh, I mean, if you invented what I would imagine is probably the worst torture device of your day, I can totally see that being your contrapasso.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Right.
Like, I don't know, it also doesn't seem to be, and maybe I just don't know enough about this particular character to understand why this would be landing him in the same layer of like deceivers and betrayers. But it's still it's a little bit more interesting with that context, because when I was reading through this, I guess I skipped over Moose's, because when Sayers talks about it, it does talk about him being tortured in the device that he created. That's true, but they also talk about the fact that there is a certain poetic beauty here. She uses different words. I don't remember off the top of my head. That she is focusing on in hers. And honestly, if we were flipping back and forth, we probably should have read Dorothy over Longfellow for this particular canto, but I'm staying consistent.
So what Sayers says is, if you want to imagine the sound that would be made from inside that bull, she compares it to speaking into a telephone, and but then having that signal transmitted as electrical waves and then retranslated into speech by a vibrating receiver at the other end of the line. So she's talking about telephones that were state of the art at the time she lived, at least at the time she wrote this.
Well, she's
You
talking
guys
about
heard.
she's talking about what we would in music would more commonly be referred to as a membranophone, but is the style of transceiver that we used in old phones, where essentially it was a vibrating piece of metal that was generating the noise by certain frequencies being pumped through it. It's wild the way she describes it, but yeah, if any of you in the audience are old enough, and I doubt you are, but if you are, and you ever picked up a rotary phone, almost assuredly this was in the earpiece that you were listening to.
Or they sometimes will take some of those early recordings of like sound, and they'll make YouTube videos out of them so everyone can hear how they sounded or whatever. You used to have to go to the
Yeah, but I
to
don't
the
I don't
like
know
the
how to search.
telephone museum in order to hear those things. But
Yeah, and
yeah,
even people like me wouldn't have gone to that museum. I'm surprised it's still in business. um, because the reality of it is like that is such a niche part of technology that like I understand a reason why we need to preserve the history of it, but at the same time, the fact that there's YouTube videos of people listening to old phone calls and like old machines and shit like that, what are you doing with your life?
oh,
Sorry.
there's a there's a novel I read one time that had as one of its subplots the fact that nobody knew what to do with all of these libraries that had these like originals of everything. So what somebody invented this device that would give you virtually 100% accuracy over everything in the library, but in the process would destroy the thing that it was recording. Like that was the only way to get as good of
Okay,
a
you just made
verisimilitude
yeah,
as you could get.
you made a fucking librarian trolley problem. I got you.
Yeah. And it was really interesting because it was like super interesting because even though it had incredible verisimilitude, it still would lose some information, right? Because perfect verisimilitude would be impossible. But it was better verisimilitude than anything else could do. And the argument of the people who invent the machine was that these books are going to decay anyway over time. So we might as well save what we can so that what we save will now be permanent because it's digital.
Yeah, and I understand the argument, and that's why I joke that you just made a librarian's fucking contrapasso
Yeah.
on this, essentially, because, like, this trolley problem to anybody who is a bibliophile, like, no, not a fucking chance. The idea of destroying books, even to record them, that's sacrilege. You basically just, you seriously, like, you will literally watch their fucking heart rates go up over this.
Yeah, sure.
Like that was my drama teacher. If Miss Lawton was
I mean,
still
they make
alive
these
and heard
decisions
you say
anyway,
that,
right? Like you can scan a thing, but you know that the light that you're using to scan it is going to accelerate its deterioration somewhat, right? And we choose to scan them anyway. So
well, within reason, some of these new scanners we use are better. But that's don't want to go off too
on the other hand,
far on
there's
that tangent.
scrolls that
But
we chose not to open because we feared destroying them, and that turned out to be the right decision because later on, the Brigham Young University came up with that scanning technology, and
well,
now we're glad we didn't open up those scrolls because we would have destroyed a lot.
Yep.
Although none of that had anything to do with the Sicilian Bull. That was just me
yes.
distracting everybody.
Well, no, but
You
the
were the
distraction.
Sicilian.
Yes, I'm the Sicilian
Look,
Bull
a
in Arcana.
distraction.
Well, but the distraction was actually useful because that book you read is kind of what this is doing. We are trying, tangents aside, sorry guys, it is creating a digital form of this information in a way that doesn't really get done. For example, the only like compendium of commentaries I was able to find for sale on Dante was printed in 1922 the last time and was several $1,000s.
Mm.
So doing stuff like this on YouTube hopefully helps these kids get access to something that they would not have access to because there's no PDF of that fucking book either because I looked. It does not exist. And I have a sneaky suspicion is because the book is so old, nobody scanned it in yet, as Rich was just bringing up. So, like this is essentially what we are doing here, and I hope you appreciate it as tangential as we get at times, because this does not exist easily. Most printers do not print books like this anymore, even in digital form, because there's not enough money in it. You are talking about when I was going over the syllabi to find like all of the people to like what your professors might be using for translations to read. Um, there are multiple universities Dante is not taught in at all. So now we are talking about a piece of a literary device that is going to be pretty much selectively partitioned into very late high school to college level work. And now not even most high schools or colleges do so. So now you're talking about trying to sell a reference textbook to, let's be generous, 10,000 universities across the world. That's unlikely, by the way. Even if each one of them buys a couple of books, there's not enough money to do all of the printing or necessary formatting for them to do this stuff anymore. So we will potentially lose some of this information to time, at least amalgamated in this way, if we do not do this type of record keeping as we are emulating the person in Rich's book there. So it does tie back in. Now that being said, it irks me not for and I am burning. It really does just make me want to smack this guy because it just smacks of yeah, fuck you, yeah, I'm burning. It doesn't bother me though. It's like
Yeah.
the people who are proud for their suffering, especially when their suffering is by their own hand. Like we all know those people, the ones who are too proud to admit they were ever wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
two of us here used to debate them on a regular basis. One of them still does.
So, so the speaker, Dante, the speaker is comparing these flames to someone who's inside one of those Sicilian bulls. But it's just a metaphor, right?
Mhm.
What they are is they are the flame itself. Because these bowls would be like there would be a fire lit under them so that it would get increasingly hotter and hotter inside. And then the screaming is what you would hear. And the noise that they would make screaming through all of that from inside the structure would sound a certain way, and the sound that's coming out of the flame sounds like that. So that's what he's explaining. But literally, he is the flame, or he's being burned by the flame, but he is also the flame itself. That's
Yes,
kind of what's being described.
yes, and this comes from the previous canto. They make a minor, or he makes a minor reference to this when he made a comment about living flames. At least when you start talking about Catholic dogma and teaching on hell, there is no such thing as a living entity of flame. There was manifestations of fire, of divine entities, etc. A couple members of the divine council were depicted as fire, but as far as living flames is outside of like even Catholic demonology. And this one I had actually contacted one of our more occult friends about this. He checked his grimoires. Yeah, that doesn't start appearing until the 1850s. This is roughly the same time we start seeing fundamentalism. Is when we first start seeing the comments of living flame in Christian iconography.
And of course, he's
Then what
asking.
about like the burning bush then?
That's a
Like
that
like
is a
within the,
manifestation of divine entity, not a living creature that is fire.
oh, okay.
Like think of it, the difference between God spoke through burning bush that He created, which is God's telephone, and God created an ifrit.
Okay.
Yeah. Like we're talking like age old demonology, dude. Not all of it makes sense. I don't necessarily even understand why they come up with some of the shit they come up with. And you know me, I've looked into some of this crap pretty heavily, and like it doesn't make sense to me. Like I don't know how. Even trying to put myself into their shoes, I have trouble coming to the conclusions they did without ergot poisoning. Like like it just said like what like how did you come to this conclusion? Like what story did somebody tell you that made this make sense to you? Is kind of where I'm at. But that being said, the reason I just you stop there is because of the simple fact is, like I said, this is being described. It is at least in my opinion, fluff. Um, Far more elucidation for a singular character that overall does not seem to be valuable to the social commentary that has surrounded it, even though it is valuable social commentary on its own. It seems like that island in this river that Dante has been doing the last three cantos. It seems out of place. And that could just be my modern lens missing something that they would have caught back then, but it does seem out of place compared to the rest of what we've been evaluating since Canto 25.
Also, should we talk about how much time, the way time is passing?
Yes, because we have it in a couple of episodes, so it'd be a good reminder. So please do.
The night already had pervaded the stars. The other, hold on, I'm trying to remember. Do you remember the time that passed in the previous canto? Not here in hell. I think we're talking about a character who was talking about, because at one point he says 5 times we saw the splendor of the moon grow full, and 5 times wane away again since we entered through the narrow pass.
Yes, and that's to imply
That's
the
Ulysses, right? Explaining how much time had passed in the story that he's recounting. Is that right?
yes, and if you're talking
Yeah. Okay.
about that, that'd be 5 full moons, which would be a little less than 5 months. It'd be like four. What's that? 4 months, 3 weeks and a day income, something like that.
Sorry, how long I missed it?
Four full moons, full moon to full moon, 4 times. Or 5 times
Basically
rather.
just 4 months.
No. Yeah, it's a little less than because of the way the lunar month doesn't line up with our calendar.
Like
Yeah.
we're they probably weren't making quite that level of distinction. It's basically saying that he saw the full moon 5 times, which would be a span of about 4 months.
Yeah, and the reason
And
I
if you,
point this
and
out
if
is
people
most
listening.
people. Oh, good.
And if people listening are wondering why that's not 5 months, remember the first full moon begins the time period, so you don't count it as a month.
So just trying to figure out how long it takes to get from the Pillars of Hercules to the foot of Mount Purgatory, right? That's what he was describing, right?
That's what he is attempting to describe, at least as far as my memory goes. Yes. And the reason the reason that I bring up lunar months is because a vast majority of people did not use calendars at this point in time. Most people use the lunar month, just because there's not exactly a printing press popping out fucking New York, firefighter calendars for these people.
It's the easiest way to measure longer spans of time.
Yeah. So this is what most people would think in, and that's why even though Dante is highly educated as he was and very capable of using exact dating methods, would even use this. And by the way, if you go back through the previous cantos, he does every time. It is always based on lunar month when he makes longer reference, hence why he uses things like fortnight, etc., because of this concept. But go on.
I was just gonna say this was Heracles' journey from the pillars of this is Odysseus's journey from the pillars of Heracles to Mount Purgatory. So he definitely would have used moons as a way to mark longer passages of time.
Good body, baby. Girl. Good girl.
Musa seems to think that Ulysses is not a fraudulent counselor. He's there for some other reason.
Um,
Uh,
I uh, I don't know why Musa would think that, but at the same time, I would say I would agree with him in that analysis based on my reading of Homer.
right, but of course he didn't have access to Homer, so
Yeah, but I'm saying I agree with Musa based on
yeah.
my reading of Homer, even though Dante would have not had access to Homer.
Yeah, Dante probably would have been would have used like Latin references, and as we saw, there were those post-Homeric references to Achilles hiding, and so Odysseus
Well,
having come in.
and he did have certain Greek access to certain Greek traditions. I just don't know the line, and honestly,
Yeah,
outside of a ancient classics like expert, defining that line of what books did they have in Europe before the Reclamation, like I don't know, because there was
yeah,
that huge influx of all the Greek masters back in the day, and it was a massive amount, and we already knew a lot. It wasn't like we knew fuck all about them, but we still got a glut of information that basically changed all of our understandings. Like there was a lot that Dante would not have had access to because that didn't happen until century and a half after he died. 2 centuries after he died, something like that. Right, Rich? 1530s or something like that.
Uh, yes, I think it's a fine guess. Yeah.
Well, I think it's early 1500s. If it's not 1530s, I apologize. I will correct myself in a comment below the video once we get done streaming. But yeah, it was like I don't know what books he had access to. I know he didn't have access to Homer because of the way he references certain characters, and completely omits others. And this is a habit that was done in Latin scholarship at this time because of the way they Latinized the Greek gods and Greek pantheon. Every time they would take in new Greek stories into their thing, things would be changed to fit more their cultural motifs. God, get your coffee, guys. Okay, I figured there'd be a comment
me.
about Minerva there or something.
I've got
No, well, I just keep seeing a reference. I guess I just don't see it in the text, but Musa keeps saying. I think what Musa's saying is his name is Guido. The man inside the flame is Guido.
Yep.
Where's that in the text? I just don't see that.
I think it's
Oh,
based on the historical record of who created the device. I don't believe it's in the
Ah,
text of the writing.
well, no, the person who that was.
Oh, I didn't know the name. I would just say that would be my
Yeah.
guess as to why
So
Musa would.
Phalaris, this is another Musa note. Phalaris was the ruler who commissioned Perillus, good name for someone to make a torture device, to construct the Sicilian bull. So neither one of them is a Guido. So I just don't know where Musa gets Guido from. I mean,
Um,
someone named Guido shows up every once
um,
in a while.
well, I'll get to reading. Do me a favor. Just Google Musa Guido Canto 27. Maybe it will come up.
Okay.
no,
If
I
that,
was reading something earlier. Let me see if I can find it
well,
again.
but I'll get to the reading so that we're not pushing too far back
Yeah,
on this tangent. We can always touch it again when I get done. Thou but lately into this blind world hast fallen down from that sweet Latian land, wherefrom I bring whole of my transgression. Say, if oh god, my fucking tongue is not gonna like this. Rognul, Ramagnuls, have peace of war, and I know I just butchered that. Sorry, French people. For I was from the mountains there between. Urbino and the yoke whence Tiber bursts. I still was downward bent and listening, when my conductor touched me on the side, saying, Speak thou, this one elation is. And I, who had beforehand my reply in readiness, forthwith began to speak. O soul, that down below there art concealed, Romagna, my tongue today. Um, Thine is not and never has been without war in the bosom of its tyrants, but open war I none have left there now. Ravenna stands as it long years has stood, the eagle of Polenta, there is brooding, so that she covers Cervea with her vans, the city which once had long resistance, and French, a sanguinary heat beneath the green paws finds itself again. Okay, so my butchered pronunciation aside, he is giving geographic landmarks essentially to uh, identify these places. It's not just the names of the cities; it is also the lands around them. And he's describing, at least in medieval texts and early Renaissance texts, you will start to see that authors are doing this when they are not talking about the city proper. They are talking about a culture of a region because of the way cultures were more patchworked back in this time period due to isolation, travel, limitations, so on and so forth. And it is an interesting way to do it because he then does so to cover an extremely large area by the span that he's covering of where the Tiber bursts. That is a long way away from the city of Ravenna. So this is a wide swath of land he is trying to describe.
So I can see in the intro to Moose's intro to the Canto, he names this flame specifically as Guido da Montefeltro, who was a sorry, we just had it. Who was a soldier, became a friar in his old age, but he was untrue to his vows when, at the urging of Pope Boniface the Eighth, he counseled the use of fraud in the Pope's campaign against the Colonna family. He was damned to hell because he failed to repent his sins, trusting instead in the Pope's fraudulent absolution.
And that's why he's here. It has nothing to do with his fucking torture device. It has to do with he told the Pope to lie. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, and apparently he introduces himself in line 29, for I come from the hills between Urbino and the mountain chain that lets the Tiber loose. And that's the clue by which we're supposed to guess that this is Guido de Montefeltro.
Yeah, I figured there had to have been a context clue as opposed to a specific name, because when I scrolled out, it wasn't anywhere in Longfellow. And Longfellow loves putting the Italian names in alongside some goddamn bastardization of Middle English and Modern English that he was going to make our tongue try to wrap around.
Right.
Because if you notice, every time he starts to get heavy into the descriptions of Italian places or names, he gets a little bit more creative with his wording. Longfellow was fun like that. And I now wonder why so many fucking professors use this translation.
Yeah. So I was trying to see if there was any additional context, because like that one reference to a geographic location, I feel like is not terribly specific, but
It's not. That's what I was saying. It covers a wide swath. It's
actually, hold on. No, I'm realizing now. He describes in later tercets, he describes himself as having been a warrior and then a friar, and yada yada yada. So he gives enough details about his past, even without having given his name specifically, that he becomes identifiable. So it's not just where he comes from. If you look down at,
No,
lines.
and that's fine. But even if that were not there, I would think that in many cases, what Dante is doing here, because it is what he has done in so many times when he does not overtly name someone, he gives what they were most well known for, because that was enough social commentary for the people of his day. We need more context because we're separated by several centuries. See what I mean? Like that
Yeah.
where the Tiber burst would probably be enough for most people in 1301.
Perhaps.
Well, I mean, I think it would be known that he comes from Montefeltro. I'm not sure that that's enough to know that he's Guido.
No, but because of the way it's worded. Think about it like when we talk about certain chefs, they're the king of New York, they're the blah blah blah. It's that type of thing where it is that nickname would be that kind of like nom de plume, even though
Title?
it's not written. Yeah, honorific, because title is. No, title's accurate too. Never mind. I needed not quibble. But yeah, but it's not necessarily a proper name or even an official name for this person, but it is what they will be known for by many within the region and time. And the reason I use the King of New York, Wolfgang Puck was named that several times. When his restaurants were open there, the guy who did Nobu did the same thing. Like this is a title in the time period that changes or that makes sense for that person and would not make sense outside of that time frame without the greater context.
I'm just going to turn, because then he starts giving a news report.
As Musa is wont to do.
Yeah, and we haven't read that part yet, but when we do, you're going to see, no, this is Dante giving the news to Guido, because basically Guido's asked, tell me the news of what's happening in Italy. And says, okay, here's what's happening in Ravenna. This is what's happening in the town whose side the Salvio bathes. Things like that. So
that's fine. I thought you were talking Musa
red.
did that too, because Musa, as we know, going through his
Well, he is doing
commentary.
it because Musa is following each one of these updates and explaining it to us. So yeah, Musa is doing that.
Well, he's also done it in other times when there was no
Yeah.
litany from Dante, so I was unsure what you meant. So, but fair enough. And if you would like to pick up, we're on line 46, and if I remember correctly, the next break would come at 66.
Okay.
And I know you'll read from there, so I'll just track on screen as necessary.
Verruccio's old mastiff and its new one, who both were bad custodians of Botania, will sink their fangs into people's flesh. The cities by Limone and Saturno are governed by the Lion and the White Liar, who changes parties every change of season. As for the town whose side the Savio bathes, just as it lies between the hills.
You're reading. You're reading.
Oh, sorry. You're right.
Yeah, he's reading the Musa.
I was like, wait a minute. You missed Wimbles. How the fuck did you not chuckle over saying Wimbles of their teeth?
No, you're right. Yeah, so I'll change. Hold on, let me.
I was about to say, hold on.
Okay, I'll start over with Longfellow. Verruccio's ancient mastiff and the new, who made such bad disposal at Montagna, where they won't make wimbles of their teeth. The cities of Limone and Saturno governs the lion's cell of the White Lair, whose changes side twixt summer and winter, and that of which Savio bathes the flank, even as it lies between the plain and mountain, lives between tyranny and a free state. Now I entreat thee, tell us who thou art. Be not more stubborn than the rest have been, so may thy name hold front in the world. Is that
to 66? To 66.
Okay. After the fire a little more had roared in its own fashion, the sharp point, it moved this way and that, and it gave forth such a breath. If I believed that my reply were made to one who to the world would e'er return, this flame, without more flickering, would stand still. But inasmuch as never from this depth did anyone return, if I hear true without any fear of infamy, I answer. Well, I can't just
Yeah,
stop
no,
there.
well, no, the reason I was
Or
going
I
to have
answer.
you
Okay,
stop.
maybe yeah, because he starts the story after that, so that's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I was going to have you stop there, because if you don't stop there, you have to go a lot further.
Yeah.
um, Now that being said, the reason I'm having you stop here is also because of the simple fact that, essentially what we're trying to get here is, this is a more plaintive way of speaking than Dante, the character, has done previously. He has usually either been more compassionate, more condemning, more judgmental. This is more a simplistic way of speaking in this particular point. And I do find it interesting when he makes these little tone shifts. I don't necessarily understand the implications, and as we see on the screen, Longfellow doesn't make comment. Musa makes comments about other things in here other than the tone, and Sayers doesn't comment on the tone at all. That's really not her style. She usually likes to focus more on like the poetry of things and the beauty of the imageries,
Yeah,
which
that's what
is
makes her that's the best.
fair enough. Uh, that being said, it is an interesting thing to note out, because when you get an emotive shift like this, it is a valuable thing to notice. Whether an author is doing it intentionally or unintentionally, we may never know, even of authors who are alive today, because they may not realize if they did something intentionally or unintentionally at times. Um, Little tone shifts like this are telling of intent, of like internal, like preconceived notions, etc. It's just it's interesting to take note of, even if we don't have the exact context to know what it might imply. That this tone shift may imply a either more affirming note, like he understood, time and place, but you fucked up, you belong here. Or this is I know this guy is a pain in my ass and I need to get him on my side so I can move on. It could be equally altruistic or selfish. But it is an interesting tone shift nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like he's just trying to get the guy to tell him who he is.
Well, yeah,
And
but if he's coaxing him, is he doing it because he's more okay with the guy, more understanding, or more understanding of who the person is, and therefore knows he has to be more placative as opposed to um, condemning as he has been with certain other people he has spoke to.
perhaps,
That's what
but like,
that was all I was
well,
pointing
I
out.
mean, I don't know if you like if you're trying to get someone's identity out of them. I don't know that being condemning would be particularly useful as a persuasive tactic, and I imagine
I
Dante
didn't
the
say
character
it.
would know this.
I didn't say it would be useful, but he has done it
Okay.
in the past when condemning other people he has spoke to use that tone. That's my point. We don't know why the tone shift is happening, because
I
we
mean,
don't have the
to me,
greater
the tone shift
context of intent.
seems yeah, the tone shift to me seems one of inquisitiveness. He's trying to figure out who this guy that's talking to him is.
Yes, but other times when he is asked this question, well, not this precise question, obviously, because worded different, but asking for the identity of a person, where he was more in a condemning mood because of words that were spoken to him by Virgil at the time. He was more accusatory, and more forthright. Who are you? Like, what is this? What is it that you have done to get here, etc. As opposed to this kind of like, hey, I'll let you know. Come on, just give me the details. This is more salon speak than condemnation, and he has used both at multiple times.
Okay, I suppose that makes sense.
And I don't understand the reasoning behind it, but it's interesting to note, because we all do that kind of tone policing is not the correct word, but it's the easiest one for now. We self tone police to modify how an encounter will go. Everybody does it. Many times it's subconscious. We don't even necessarily realize we're doing it at times. That slight octave shift, that slight vocabulary shift when the girl you like walks by, as opposed to when you're talking to your buddy who works in the dock with you. Yeah, that just is a very reductio ad absurdum version of it.
So basically, code switching.
Thank you. That was the phrase or the term I was trying to think of when I thought tone policing. But yeah, code switching. Yes.
Yep.
Precisely. This is not new. This is something that we recognize in language going back to long before even the proto languages that gave birth to English existed. We see this tone shifting even in cuneiform.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Like, my buddy came to visit, for like 3 or 4 days, and I had to do a lot of the translation for him when we were out and about, and I have to code switch not only my voice but also my mannerisms of how I approach people and how I explain things.
I can only imagine.
It's like I have to explain things one way and then change my entire demeanor to talk with the person again. Like you can't do the same. Like I can't approach this person the same way I can approach my friend.
No, and that's fair. But here's the other thing: even if it was your friend in Japan, you couldn't approach that friend in Japan the same way you could either, because that's why the second you started bringing it up, I started cackling because I'm just sitting there going, "Oh yeah, pretty much the trope of every '80s movie that had any white person in Japan."
Yep.
This was Hiro-san, the guy from Gung Ho. This was the guy who was constantly trying to smooth over what Michael Keaton was doing.
Yep.
And then I forget the guy's name, but it won't come to me right now. The guy from Mr. Baseball was probably the funniest example of this because he also kind of explained without telling us the name, Hana and Tatemai. The difference of, sometimes yes means no, but you never want yes to mean no.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, it's hone.
Hone, sorry. I don't say these words often enough to remember the pronunciations all the time. You live this shit. But if you forget this would be like death sentence to you socially. I forget this. Yeah. It's a minor laugh at Jack moment. Yeah, it just is what it is. So, that being said, now he is getting into the story, and there's a reason that this particular story is a bit longer, and I wanted for it to stop because we did need to talk about the previous context, but also a little bit of precursor into this is we get into, like, when I looked at the Italian in this is another section of a canto where his Italian suddenly starts to follow more of an ecclesiastical Latin style. And now that the commentary of the actual like friar teaching, that makes even more sense than I previously interpreted this to. But he is code switching. The author, the author Dante Alighieri, is code switching to fit the voice of this friar as he would be probably likely to speak. I'm not saying if Dante ever met him, he may be making this up, but more churchy. He's churching up the speech here, and it is not as obvious in any of the English translations that this happens, but it is very obvious when you look at the Italian, because like Ann Com and I did a couple of cantos ago, suddenly there's more proper sentence structure. There's more secondary declination words. the language is very much different than the average Italian or even the average Dante Italian to yell around it. It's like suddenly somebody saying thee or thou to you. It catches your attention.
Yeah.
I just put a little graphic in. I guess right now only Ancom can see it, but I'm trying to like cordon off the news report. Dante's update for Guida. So it's on 5 lands. It's Ravenna, and then that's the only one that's actually named, and the other ones just are given titles. So the land that stood the test of long endurance is Forli, Verruccio's Old Mastiff, and its new one, that's Malatesta and Malastina. Those are people, but it's also he's talking about like the territory.
The lands they encompass, yeah.
Then the cities by Lemon and Saturno, that's Fazenza and Imola, and then the town whose side the Savio bathes is Cesana. So he said, okay, I'm giving you the news report for these 5 places. Now you tell me something.
And I forget where I was looking. I think it was like the Perseus Project or something like that. But there's somebody
who
does
one.
Did I?
Because we haven't got.
Yeah.
Oh,
no, Ravenna, and then at the end of that terset, Servia.
Yeah, Serbia is at the end of that. Cervia.
Yep.
I think it was on the Perseus Project. They show.
And Verruccio is another one. You labeled it as Malatesta
42.
father and Malatestina's son, but Verruccio was the actual city.
Oh, yeah, wait, Serbia, I think that's part of the same report. So Ravenna's situation has not changed because the eagle of Polenta broods up there covering all of Serbia with its pinions. So I suppose,
Serbia is another town.
Yeah. So I should just say Ravenna and Serbia?
Yes.
Yes, and like I was saying,
so in your third, in the third terset, you mentioned Malatesta father and Malatestina's son, but Verruccio is the city. Verruccio's Old Mastiff and its new one. So the Mastiffs are the leaders of that town, but Verruccio is the town itself.
Maybe I'll just split that up so that I can, because I want to talk about both of them. I think it's kind of interesting. The old and new Mastiff I thought was kind of cool. Kind of reminds me of Pliny the Elder and Pliny the Younger.
Well, that's for different reasons, but more my point is the region. As I was saying, I think it was Perseus Project. They show a map of the area he's talking about. I forget the exact square mileage, but this, for the ancient times, this was a huge swath of land that they're talking about that encompasses all these towns. So this is why I brought up the regional like specificity of this language is in the way that he is giving it this titular way of nomenclature as opposed to.
How's it now, Mike? Okay.
Back-end stuff does not need to interrupt the video.
It's fine.
God. Literally mid-sentence. Rich, you're horrible.
Well, I was trying to fix it because you were going to go on and then I was going to forget. So I inserted that.
We have side chats for that. Type. But that being said. Okay. Rich, as you just read, Ancom, if you would like to go next,
okay.
Basically, I think his story ends on, was it 84? No, it's... Yeah, it is 84.
Okay.
So 66 to 84.
67 to 84.
67 to 84, my bad.
Yeah. I was a man of arms, then Cordelier, believing thus begirt to make amends, and truly my belief had been fulfilled. But for the high priest, whom may ill betide, who put me back into my former sins, and how and wherefore I will have thee hear. While I was still the form of bone and pulp my mother gave to me, the deeds I did were those of a lion, or were not those of a lion, but a fox. The machinations and covert ways, I knew them all, and practiced their craft, that to the ends of the earth the sound went forth. When now unto that portion of mine age I saw myself arrived, when each one ought to the lower sails and coil away the ropes, that which before had pleased me then displeased me, and penitent and confessing I surrendered. Ah, woe is me, and it would have bestead me.
Okay, so there's a few intimations here. The lower the sails and coil away the ropes. If you need that explained, I do not know why Longfellow made a comment here, but seriously, that's first of all. But it is also the way that he started this. So if I'm remembering correctly, a cordelier is a particular type of military position that was
Nope. It's a friar.
Oh, okay.
It's a friar wearing the cord of the Franciscan order.
Interesting.
So he was saying he went from being a soldier to a friar.
I thought that was the next line where he brought in the friar, but okay, fair enough. He went to a friar, and that is fine. But for the high priest who may ill betide, who put me on my back of my former sins, this is a roundabout way of saying his confessor. And in ancient times, your confessor was essentially the person outside of your king who held the most power over you. And I think that is what is attempting to be elucidated here, because Dante has done that with many other priests that he has put in hell. Elucidated their corruption of the church and the power that they abuse from those positions. And at least in my opinion, that's what he's pointing to here by bringing that this is a confessor over him. So he's pointing to a confessor that ill used him, and he essentially followed suit.
Specifically, the priest, or I'm sorry, the
high
Pope.
priest.
A high priest referring to the Pope.
Yeah, I mean, I would interpret it that way too, especially to a Catholic, but it could just as easily be generic bishops, cardinals, etc. He could just be pointing to any of the higher priestly orders, and it may not be necessarily just the Pope, because usually when Dante mentions the Pope, even as through the voice of another character, he uses one of the more papal names that is not universal to other clergy of the church. He uses vicar, he uses pope directly. Several times.
I mean, every note I can see on this, from Sayers to Musa to Hollander, they all indicate that high priest refers specifically to the Pope.
Yes, and they say that. And if you look at the way that the language has been used up to this point, they will point to the Pope very specifically all the time earlier, and they will bring out how he's bringing up specific names, he's bringing up the specific crimes, etc. But here he uses high priest. And yes, it could be the Pope, but high priest is not a univocal title within the Catholic Church to mean the vicar of Christ, the throne of St. Peter. It is not just the Pope who gets that title. Bishops, cardinals, archbishops can all also be called this. So that's why I
thought it was. I always thought it was a person that had a position of authority over others within the same region. So, like as an example, you'd have let's say a parish that has a large number of parishioners. So you may have multiple priests working throughout the same church itself. So the one of the priests would be put in charge of the other priests, and that would be called the high priest.
And it later
you could
became
have it the same.
and it later became more like formalized over time as the church became more solidified, and it became higher and higher up the chain of
Yeah.
but it is not, even to this day, it is not a universal title that is reserved for the throne of St. Peter.
Right.
It's just not how it was used. So while these translators may be right, I am pointing out that it could also be any other point of high clergy because of the way this title is not universally used in that way.
Yeah.
So I just consulted ChatGPT just to see what it would say, and it said a priest that is participating in the personhood of Christ, who is the stand-in for Jesus in that given area. Which
So
to
anybody
me,
giving sacrament would be that as well.
yeah, well, if you're standing in, it seems to me that just given what uh, Despy just said, is if you're in a room and there's multiple priests, then the one who is the stand-in for Christ is the highest ranking priest.
Right.
Yep. Who is speaking for the Pope there? Who is speaking for that bishop? Who is speaking for that
Who
card,
is speaking for
etc.
Peter, who is speaking for Jesus. Yeah.
Yep. And that's what I'm trying to get at. This has never been, like, going all the way back to Augustine, which is basically the birth of the Catholic Church as we know it. This has not been a universally or univocal title to be given to the Vicar of Christ. Even the Vicar of Christ was not univocal to, on
You're
the
right back.
Pope until many centuries later. In fact, that didn't cement until, what was it, 7th, 8th century? I forget now. It was the first Urban.
But then in Italian, it would be, I just looked it up, it's the Gran Prete, which it means the grand priest more closely.
And yes, this
Um,
is kind of my point, Ancom. Translators, and you've seen me and Rich argue about this, previously. They always put their level of interpretation in it. Like I bring up that Sayers is want to remove any kind of vulgarity or profanity and make it more um, um, family friendly way of saying things, even if it ends up meaning that she has to change the wording completely to end up fitting into the tercerima. Like she does that several times. Musa, as we have pointed out, puts in his own interpretation where he everymans it, where the guy in hell sounds like a guy in Jersey, shouting you down for the news, etc., etc. And their interpretation is going to come from a certain level of, especially considering most of these commentators were believers themselves, certain level of reverence for that role, and they will push it to the highest. And we see this as a tendency in many cases where we look back through history where the actions of this cardinal or that cardinal are viewed as the actions of the Pope. It's the captain of the ship is responsible for everybody under them conversation, but that's not actually how this word works in the grand scheme of things. That may be how the chain of responsibility would go, but that's not how the colloquial chain of speech goes.
okay, but in this case, he really is talking about the Pope, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like in 70, he's
For the
saying,
most part.
were it not for that high priest, his soul be damned, which we know it's damned because he's in hell.
Yeah.
But also then later on, so he's saying, were it not for that high priest who put me back upon my early sins. So he's blaming the
The
Pope
Pope for
for
making him a sinner again.
doing
Yes.
that. And then he elaborates in 85. He says, the prince of the new Pharisees, which that clearly must be the Pope, right? Like the new Pharisees would be like what the corrupted church had become in Dante's day.
Thank you.
And he
But
says,
I had you stop at 84 for this reason, because I was
oh,
going to
okay.
get to this in the next one, because this is where I think that the literary commentators should have spoke to more historians, because at this time period there was actually a particular not coup, but usurping of certain powers from the Pope by certain cardinals. So at this time, the leader of the modern Pharisees could have been the leader of those cardinals, which did operate as a group. But
So just to in interest of looking at how this line would have been taken historically, I went back to the oldest commentaries we have from one from Dante's, I believe, brother, Jacopo Alighieri, and another from a name I have no idea who this is, Graziolo Bambaglioli, who wrote in Italian and Latin, respectively. Both of them, when referring to this line, mention Boniface.
Yes, and I understand this. And you are trying to point to other commentators who are reading this work outside of the mind of the author and even his brother, unless he is saying that Dante told him this is Boniface. This is not a univocal thing. It could be he is trying to imply the Pope. It could be he is trying to imply the cardinals under the Pope because he never had a direct dealing with the Pope. It could be multiple implications because high priest is not a univocal term. And as I point out, the further back you go, the more chance you have of their commentators being believers and having this secondary reverence implication that could be coloring their bias. That's why I bring up, could they be right? Absolutely.
Yes. You're positing a novel interpretation. But
I'm positing one that is, well, not novel, just new. There's a few more modern scholars who point that this is a possibility, even though it is not a likelihood, because of the simple fact that it is against the scholarly consensus to say this, because you are literally dealing with centuries of scholarly consensus that is mostly made up of people within the faith or within neighboring faiths.
So then you have to, okay, we'll get to that when we get to that Prince of the New Pharisees line.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other contexts as to who that person is, so it becomes less and less likely that it's someone other than Boniface VIII, I think, if you read in all the context clues.
Yes, and this is why I say, could they be right? Yes, absolutely. But it could be like he does so many other times. He is being intentionally vague in that way where it could mean more, so that the reader can get greater interpretation, secondary implications, read in their own implications of who that high priest might be in their own life when they're envisioning how this story appeals to their own sensibilities, etc. I am talking about Dante, the author, the guy who quite literally has confused scholars for multiple centuries because of how complex he wrote De Monarchia, that it is literally still used to this day in many places to like advise them on how to make new laws. They will reference it in like actual precedent. Like this is that's all.
It's kind of hard for me to also ignore like 91 and 92.
Sorry, just to correct an earlier thing. Jacopo was not his brother, it was his son, and he had another son named Pietro who also wrote a commentary that also suggests this. So I'm just putting it out there.
I'm
and
not
also,
saying
like,
that it's not probable that they're right. I'm saying it's possible that he's being more ambiguous intentionally because of the fact that he is writing this as social commentary to not only be read in his time, but to be read beyond this time, as we point out in Canto 17, when he makes that particular line about this being read into the future by generations to come who may have even forgotten his name.
Yeah, but then the clincher for me is he has a lofty papal seat. I think there's only one lofty papal seat.
I would argue no, because the papal seat is anything within the Vatican, at least in my opinion, because they call the throne of St. Peter the throne of St. Peter, and they call papal seats in conclave that those are for cardinals, so it's not reserved just for the
cardinals don't have
again.
papal seats, and if they did
No,
have papal
they don't
seats,
have papacies, but they have been, those places have been called papal seats. That's why I say I don't. I think we are talking about a univocal application of this language throughout time when we know that these practices and dogma and doctrines have changed throughout time, and that they are, let me rephrase that since I'm very much not part of this fucking church anymore, and they attempt to very often push back a univocal interpretation of how their changes are to be interpreted. This is always how we've been. This is exactly how the church has always been, and they do that quite often. And you and I both
Yeah,
know
but
this.
in this
We
case,
talk.
I don't think I need to know what a papal seat meant throughout history. I only have to know what it meant in Dante's day,
And
right?
in 1301, a seat within conclave was a seat bestowed by the papal throne, and it was called a papal seat in multiple documents within canon law, which is why I say this is not univocal throughout time, which is why I say I don't know. It's why I
Okay, but
add in this
if you're,
ambiguity. And you
I'd
guys
like to
keep
see those.
pushing towards scholarly consensus, and that's kind of my point. Yes,
I'd like to
scholarly
see. No,
consensus
I'm not.
all agrees that it's Pope, as we've
I'm not.
established 6 times now.
I'm not. No, no. I've moved beyond scholarly census. I'm talking about the text, and it says lofty papal seats. So there's number one. I'd like to see the references that say that in
And
Dante's time, every cardinal had a papal seat, and there's this, what they sat in
they
was
were
called the papal seat, because that would be interesting. But also, of those seats, let's say that were true, of those seats, what's the one that's lofty?
I think it's the guy that they called. I forget what they called him in this time period. I'd have to go look up the Italian for this, but I believe it's the head of conclave by what we would call it in English,
The head of the conclave. So his hold on. So
which would
the
be is a particular position
so
that
the
when
prince of the new
conclave's not in
Pharisees,
succession.
who has a lofty papal
It
seat,
says leader of the modern Pharisees in this one, and if you look at the Italian, that particular word they use is
the
not the
principal. When in the Italian, it's lo principe.
which can be the
He's the
leader.
equivalent of a prince.
Okay. It can also be used for the leader when not used in a clerical sense, but sure. That's kind of my point.
I mean,
He
no, I
uses
think leader is a
ambiguity in
fine
language,
translation of it. Yeah,
and that's why I'm
I
saying
just
he uses ambiguity in language, specifically his language, that we are then interpreting through
I
even
think
more
often he does.
ambiguous modern language.
I think often he does. I think though that I think he's being particularly bold here. It's right. It seems to me that he's trying not to give too much room for ambiguity here, because he doesn't want people making excuses later. He's trying to be like this.
I guess more my point is why would he use ambiguity here? Like I think he is, when he outright names these popes in previous passages. Wouldn't that be the bold move as opposed to these more poetic flourishes later on?
Okay, but then we would have to ask ourselves who else fits all of these different descriptions, which mean somebody who waged war upon the Lateran, somebody who apparently declined to uh, uh, to uh, go on another crusade, because that's part of the criticism as well, that he could have fought the Saracens or the Jews, and instead he fought his own church.
Mm-hmm. And if we remember, as I was talking about, we also have this particular rebellious group of cardinals at the time who were fighting the Pope because
Yeah.
both
So I'm trying to.
both had positive and negative incentives against the crusade, and it was a constant war at the higher ups. Yes, the Pope does have the ultimate say in things, but you and I both know a Pope that doesn't have the backing of his constituary or his constituents. I'm not going to be able to say the word right now. Of his cardinals, he is going to fucking be deposed rather quickly, especially in this time period, as we have seen in multiple points in Catholic history.
I
Right.
would like to point out, so when y'all were talking about his lofty papal seat, which Longfellow and Sayers both translate simply as high office, the word or the term there, sommo officio, literally means highest office.
Mm,
So
yeah.
Sommo means highest or greatest. So he's not just talking about any high seat. He's literally talking about the highest office within the Catholic Church.
That might cinch it. I would have to go back and see if there's any secondary interpretations of that. Because obviously, because I don't speak ancient Italian, I have to do certain levels of translation. I can do the Latin, can't do the Italian. I'll have to go back. Maybe there is a secondary reference that says this, but if what you're saying is accurate, and I believe it probably is, then this would clinch it, because that would be something that is lost in the nuance of the translation, as opposed
Possibly,
to
but the
anything
Latin,
else.
Yeah, this is derived from the Latin
No,
summus.
Yeah, but now I have to look if there's any contemporary where this also meant the head of conclave, like I was suggesting with the papal seat one, which is supported in English scholarship, but I don't know if it's supported in Italian now that you have brought this point up. So now I need to look that up. So I have to put this on the back burner until I can look it up. I'm not going to do that while we're live. That'll take too fucking long, and you know how long it is to get into that level of scholarship. Because now I have to do cross references with all contemporary sources from 1270 to 1320 to see when the shift may have happened, if there was a shift at all, etc.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So,
but just to be clear, it'll be highest order of the Sacred Order. So highest office of the Sacred Order is the most literal.
No, it's saying ne sommo officio ne ordini sacri, meaning neither his highest office nor his sacred.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not of the Sacred Order. It's saying not highest office, not Sacred Order. If we were to transliterate as closely as possible, but basically it's saying neither, like. He's saying that neither his highest seat nor his Sacred Order are preventing him from acting in this way.
That makes sense. Yeah.
but since we have skipped ahead to get to this point in the commentary, I guess we should actually read the part we're talking about now instead of just having it on screen for the people. The leader of the modern Pharisees, having a war near unto the Lateran, and not with the Saracens nor with the Jews. For each one of his enemies was Christian, and none of them had been conquered. None of them had been to conquer Acre, nor merchandising in the Sultan's land, nor the high office, nor the sacred orders in him regarded, nor in me that cord, which used to make those grit with it more meager. But even as Constantinople sought out Sylvester to cure his leprosy within Soracte. My brain today. So this one sought me out as an adept to cure him of the fever. To cure him of the fever of his pride. Counsel he asked of me, and I was silent because his words appeared inebriate. And then and then he said, "Be not thy heart afraid. Henceforth I thee absolve, and thou instruct me how to raise Palestrina to the ground. Heaven have I power to lock and to unlock, as thou dost know. Therefore the keys are two, the which my predecessor held not dear." Okay, so now this is why again I point to this, because yes, technically we refer to the Pope as the holder of the sacred keys, but a majority of the time those keys are not held within the sacred office of the Pope. They are held within his conclave. They are the ones who actually hold most of those sacraments outside of major ceremonies in their version of a tabernacle, which has its own specific special name, that holds all of the papal sacraments. And that's why I say I think this ambiguity is intentional by Dante, who was extremely well educated on the church and was wanting this to be something that would not be period specific. As I point out, he even taught, and Rich and I, were fascinated by his foresight. that, or arrogance, depending on how you look at it, that he believed this would be read so far into the future, that he wanted that level of ambiguity. It even stated that he wanted this to be read into the future in previous passages. Now,
I mean, perhaps, but I feel like he's also trying, like, yes, he was expecting it to be read into the future, but his primary goal was to make it relevant to the current day, so that
which is why
readers and those who were
why
listening would understand.
Which is why the ambiguity. First of all, dangerous to write something like this in his day, but second of all, because then it can apply to those people. They're not going to know our context. How the fuck would they? They wouldn't have any other context beyond like their history to apply it to. And they did not have the plethora and access to long-term history like we did. Even highly educated people did not have the level of access to historical data that we do today. And like even of their region. Like, think about it this way, Ancom. Imagine trying to go to a library full of scrolls and books and, you know, all of the pamphleting and all the different ways we used to keep this, and trying to find a particular notation within it with no Dewey Decimal System, no index, no card catalog, and just the memory of whatever scholar happens to remember where it is on the shelf, hopefully to lead you to go find it.
Just one really autistic guy that knows where all the books are.
And, I mean, quite literally, that's what you hope he was at that time period. Because, like, imagine if you had the drunk scribe who fucking, you know, just put stuff willy-nilly in your particular, you know, area. Imagine trying to find this shit. Even having access, let's say they had access to all of the documents, the ability to actually sort through it was minimal. And that's why I say, I think he's doing this ambiguity. He's using the colloquial terms that in his time period would absolutely be understood to be talking about Boniface. But I think he also left this in there where it could be read throughout time as multiple. And I'm not sure if Dante was aware of this particular battle with the cardinals. This comes from the history of the Vatican. This doesn't necessarily mean that he knew about it up in Florence.
Yep.
I mean, given the intricate politics related to, you know, the stuff between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, and then the whites versus the blacks, like, this was all about Vatican politics, even up in Florence.
Yes, but my point is, doesn't mean he's going to know every detail, every infight, every small thing. That they're definitely not going to want the wider world to know that they're infighting within the Vatican. That is stuff that that becomes rumors, not widely known. It's later that it becomes known, and I'll use this as a prime example. When we had better recording medium, better ability to transmit data, it took up to 4 years of Alexander Sextus's reign for certain places of Italy to even realize he was Pope.
So another context clue is he asked me to advise him.
Mm-hmm.
I was silent for his words were drunken. It's sort of like, I don't know, if you have to, you know, be Trump's advisor on something, like, do you do it because you could steer him away from like the worst decisions?
There goes half of our audience.
Yeah, I doubt it at this point. Yeah, but anyway, he says he asked me to advise him, and we do know that. I mean, I've looked this up already. That Guido did advise Boniface VIII.
Okay, and like I said, it very well could be this. I still think the ambiguity is there intentionally because he has not been shy to name the Vicar of Christ on earth before. He has even used that direct line in Italian in previous cantos.
And also, when he says, "Heaven have I power to lock and unlock, as thou dost know, yeah. Therefore the keys are two, the which my predecessor held not dear." Having the keys to lock and unlock heaven,
I brought this.
That feels.
Yeah, I brought this up. Those aren't always held outside of high ceremony by the papacy. Get cat.
Well,
By the
I'm not
papacy,
talking
they're
about
held.
necessarily literal keys. I'm talking about the metaphorical power to lock and unlock heaven. That sounds like something only the
Yes.
Pope would have.
If there is a sitting pope at the time. Otherwise, that does fall at a certain time to the interim head of the church while they are selecting a new pope, which is that head of conclave that holds this tabernacle that I was talking about, which is why I bring up this ambiguity. And you guys aren't listening to the things I'm bringing up because you're trying to just go back to the scholarly consensus. Otherwise, I would not have to repeat these things
I'm not appealing to the scholarly consensus. I'm just going to the text.
I'm literally reading from the text,
and the plain reading of the text at this point, as the English translators, this is my point. You keep going to the scholarly consensus.
To the Italian. We're trying to.
Never mind. That's for the language, not the overall conceptualization of everything I've been talking about at this point. And that's why I've had to repeat myself several times, which is why Despy is getting annoyed with me having to repeat myself this long. Hey, I've seen the looks on your face when I've had to keep going. 1 second. Be right back.
I mean, it seems to me that the prudent thing to do is to go to the Italian whenever possible. That way, I'm just addressing the objections that Jack's making, right? If his objection is that, well, all these context clues are in the English and the translators are biased, and so we can't trust that. That's a good reason to go back to the Italian.
No, I'm not saying that, but the implications therein, as we are pointing out, or as I have pointed out, I should say, you are finding it down to this thing, as opposed to the holistic way that Dante has acted to this point, as if he is operating in a very specific way this way, yet he is operated in this ambiguous way the rest of the time, and that does not actually fit with everything else we have been talking about for multiple months now on this particular thing. And I think the point that you're trying to get to is because so many people agree that it is the Pope. I'm not saying it's not the Pope. I'm saying this ambiguity could have intentionally been put in there because of the way he intended this to be read into the future, and because he understood that corruption was still within the Catholic Church. This social commentary was meant to be persistent. As I pointed out when I brought this up in the first place before I even read the section further. And as I then pointed out, it is a majority of the time that those keys are not held in papal hands and is held in the trust of the conclave within that box, because it is not actually the vicar of Christ on earth. He is somebody who is entrusted with the church. The church itself is the thing that holds those keys, not the Pope himself, because that is a later teaching that came in the 15 to 1600s that we interpret more modern today.
Well, Jack, I will say I'm inclined to believe Rich just because of the fact that he said it was prudent.
God damn it. Well, at least we're going back for the frickin' the built-in jokes that only we will get. Belabor my pumpkin, you prick. And this is kind of
I think this is a pumpkin that has been well belabored.
Yes, and we should.
I'm pretty sure this pumpkin has been minced into goo at this point.
And
this pumpkin is ready to be made into pie.
Yeah, and like I said, the whole reason that this was my argument is because there are new scholars that are coming to this ambiguous point, because they are doing cross-disciplinary studies and bringing in historical implications that Dante may or may not have been aware of that could have influenced the way that he chose to word things. And that's why I said, when you look through this, scholarly consensus is it's the Pope. 100%, no question. It's not been questioned for centuries until recently, when more cross-disciplinary studies are being done on subjects. At least until recently.
Yeah, I'd like to read those. If you could link those to me, that'd be great. But just getting back to the point that Ancom made, like I'm just looking at the language, right? It's like this is in first person. Mine is the power, as you cannot deny, to lock and unlock heaven. So this is clearly a claim that Boniface is making. I don't think that no one had ever heard of this power until the 15th century. It seems to me that it's a claim that's being made at least by Boniface in the context of all of this, and he's saying it in the singular first person multiple times, right? Mine is the power, two keys I have, and then those keys my predecessor did not cherish, which implies that his predecessor also had those keys. So that implies that the keys went from one pope to another pope. There's no
So what?
indication that he's
I guess
collectively
here's the
owned.
question to make sure that this is probably where we're misunderstanding each other. What do you think the two options here are?
What do you mean?
And what my counter proposal is? Do you think I'm saying
I
it's
no,
not
I
the
get
Pope at
that
all,
I get that
or
you're
do you
not
think I'm saying
disagreeing.
that it? Or do you think I'm
No,
saying that Dante, because of the way he chose it, said that it is this Pope and
I get
potentially
that you're saying.
another?
I get that you're saying that this being Boniface the Eighth is a valid interpretation,
Yeah.
uh, and that you're saying that there is a secondary interpretation that's possible but not proven that needs to be investigated that we
Well,
cannot rule out.
Well, that we couldn't prove anyways, because this is intent. This is one of those things. We cannot go back in time and talk to Dante and get his intentionality. But when he gets more ambiguous, it's more when we start thinking that these are the commentaries that he meant to go further into the future, because those are the ones that can be read into many times in history, both before Dante and since Dante, about the Catholic Church, and more specifically the Vatican subpolitics.
Sure, I just don't see it here. I don't deny like that's
And
the
that's fair. I
general.
mean, like I said, I could be wrong. These other people could be wrong. That's my point is to bring it up because it is an interesting point to bring up. I did not expect this level of pushback on it
Well,
because I
no,
expected it to be this is a
it's a
second
novel
interpretation
interpretation
as
we're gonna
opposed to
interrogate. I mean,
Jack, it really is the only prudent thing to do.
yeah.
yeah. But more of my point is I expected a little bit of pushback as opposed because I'm not saying it's not Boniface at all. I think it's Boniface and the ambiguity is an
Okay.
and, not an or.
That yeah, that was at least to me
Not
that was
clear, and that's
not,
why
yeah.
I asked, because I was like, wait a minute, I think I figured out where the misunderstanding is coming from, and that was that's why I had to make that clear.
Yeah, it seemed to me, anyways, that you were saying no, it's not
And
Boniface, it's something else.
No, that could be my fault because of the way I worded it, as opposed to, I think it is not Boniface. I think it is Boniface and something else. I didn't articulate that as clearly. That could be on me, but that is what I'm trying to say. Is that he
No,
made
I
it that
understood that from the beginning to be what you're saying.
yeah, but
That makes no sense.
you did, but Ancom didn't, which is why I'm glad I asked the question, because I think
Yeah.
that's where part of this confusion started and why the level of pushback was a little heavier.
Well, and the
than I
other thing
expected.
too is it's almost as if this is being scripted in order to make this argument, because he's even saying as you cannot deny, right? Which is an indication that people in Dante's day did not question that the Pope had the keys and no one else.
Well, that's actually an insertion from Musa. That doesn't exist in the Italian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm going at. It's like when we're going back and forth, and
Then
I know
Musa
we're not
is
being
saying
as
you cannot deny it.
yes,
Like,
Or rather,
and I
That
yeah,
Jack
the
clearly cannot deny it.
the phrase that he is translating to "you cannot deny" is "come tu sai," which just means "as you know." Like
Yeah,
that's a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit less direct and like.
yeah, Rich. If you were to compare this section to Church Latin, you will see the same level of ambiguity we start seeing in places like Psalms. We see it in Song of Solomon, etc. Places where that ambiguity is meant for poetic flourish and metaphorical interpretation, intentionally so.
Yeah, but to me, like especially in the context of the church, when you use the word to know, like with Gnosticism, for instance, you're talking about certainty.
Um,
That's why the Gnostics referred to themselves as, gave themselves
The
that name, was
Gnostics.
because they claimed to have secret knowledge, right? That was absolutely true and undeniable.
Yes, and I would agree with you in epistemological hermeneutics. I would not agree with you in colloquial usage by followers, because that's still not even agreed to this day. That's literally been something that's been argued about since the 4th century.
But you would agree that popes, even of this day, would, just because rulers in general do this, would claim as much
Mhm.
correctness to themselves as possible, right?
Or
He's going to make
any corrupt perfunctory
and
under it.
already
Yeah.
the schism, has the schism happened yet?
At
The Great
1301.
Schism, yeah.
No, it started. It hasn't completed.
Are you talking the Great Schism, or are you talking about like a schism?
A Great Schism, like the idea.
Great Schism was like 1098 or something like that.
Oh yeah. So already
Yeah,
the church is making a claim, has been making a claim for centuries, that the Pope univocally has this power. Right?
Yes. Well, the Vatican universally has this power, but yes, it's a minor distinction. But yes.
Well, no. I mean, the See of Peter has this power, right? Like, because the whole argument is whether or not it requires all of the patriarchs or the majority of the patriarchs, whether or not Petrine primacy is the equivalent of Petrine supremacy. These are all questions that caused the schism. And
Yes,
Rome's
and
position
did
is
not
that
and overall did not get cemented until 4 centuries later. That's kind of my
but it's
point.
the
Like
claim that Rome
it's
makes.
still
I'm not saying-
ongoing.
Well, it's still ongoing. Yeah, it's a question that hasn't been settled at all, unless you mean to say that it's been settled in Rome.
Settled
This is a
in
claim
Rome.
that
Yeah.
Rome was willing to go to war over this, right? So,
Mhm.
it's a
No,
pretty
no,
strong claim.
that's why I'm saying it's a strong claim, yes, but even in Rome, they did not settle this of this is known, we will not fight over this, we will not even discuss its contents until about 4 centuries later, which is why when you said has the Great Schism happened yet, I was about to say no, it's still ongoing until Despy interrupted to say yes, it started in 1098. It's just the schism goes on for a very long time, at least based on what we understand from Catholic teachings. I don't know all the
Right.
Orthodox
Right.
teachings
But
on
I'm
that
just saying,
one, so I can't say that from their point
It
of view.
might not be 1098, but it's late 11th century. I know that.
yeah, and also if there's anyone who's going to be on the hard side of that, it would be the Pope himself, right? It would be the See of Peter, because See of Peter is the one that's making the claim.
I would say anybody in the
So it makes sense that he would
cardinal.
say something like, "As you know," right? Like the word knowledge here, is sort of pretty critical to know something, as opposed to to think something, right?
Yeah, but that's a more modern interpretation of the epistemological understanding between knowledge and just common thought. Like the colloquial common thought was not reviewed at this level by most common people. This was reserved for the most highly educated. And remember,
It seems to me that
Dante
Ford
meant this to be Dante wrote this to be performed in front of groups. This is not some scholarly work that was going to go on
Although
a shelf for all.
last week, we did come across the line that indicates that he's addressing the reader, not the performer, right, or not the
Yeah,
audience.
yes,
It says specifically the reader. So I think he does.
and other performances do
to read
this
it.
all the way back into the Greek tragedies 1,000 years prior to this, 2,000 years, or no, 1,500
I'm just
years
saying.
prior to this.
I don't think it'll be a surprise to him that people read it.
All right.
No.
Just a quick thing. According to Wikipedia, anyways, the Great Schism began in 1054 when
1054.
Cyrillarius tried to close all the Latin churches, and Pope Leo IX traveled to Constantinople to deny Cyrillarius the title of ecumenical patriarch and insist that he recognize the Pope's claim to be the head of all the churches.
Yeah, and like I said, and that becomes cemented when fucking basically Rome stops fighting it and basically says, "No, you guys are just wrong." After that, but yes, it is um, a particular point in history that has still, if we're being honest, not truly been cemented to this day, since there
No.
has not been the Pope at any of these councils for them. But as far as everybody is concerned, it's pretty much done. Nobody's
Yeah.
going to war over this anymore. No countries are
Yeah,
going to
it's
be like raising fucking
like
the Vatican
we
on
literally
this.
just saw the Pope and one of the Orthodox Church patriarchs have a meeting after Bob was elected. So like
Yeah.
they're pretty much set that these are just two separate things now.
Yeah, and this isn't me trying to throw any shade on them. I'll do that another time. This is just more me going, it's technically not settled, but it's settled because nobody wants to do any more war over this shit. At least not openly. Maybe some nut jobs on YouTube that you can find, but like the church leaders don't, anyways. They've moved past it. It's now an argument for the scholars and the church lawyers to deal with. That being said, Despy, if you would like to take this part, because honestly, your voice doing this particular the part is going to be funny because I have the sneaky suspicion there's a few words that you're going to have fun with, just because I've talked to you before.
All right. So,
And
where am I
not
going to?
No, yeah, we really should stop at 123.
Okay.
Just because. Okay, there. Go away, stupid thing. There. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
And 123 is and after he had bitten it in great rage.
No. It's here. I'm just not. You want me to zoom in more? I can. I just don't want to move it too far off.
So which line is the line I need to go to?
I'll put it's. You can't get the full tercet below it. So now you read to the bottom that you can with the full tercet.
Then urged me on his weighty arguments, there where my silence was the worst advice. And said I, Father, since thou washest me of that sin unto which I now must fall, the promise long, with the fulfillment short, will make thee triumph in thy lofty seat. Francis came afterward, when I was dead. For me, but one of the black cherubim said to him, Take him not, do me no wrong. He must come down among my servitors, because he gave the fraudulent advice, from which time forth I have been at his hair. For who repents cannot be absolved, nor can one both repent and will at once. Because of the contradiction which consents not, O miserable me, how I did shudder when he seized on me, saying, Peradventure, thou didst not think that I was a logician. He bore me.
Yeah, you can't finish it. You can't see the rest of that tercet. That's why I said just stop where you finish a full tercet. Can't see all three lines. That's 123 is where the logician line. Okay, so
I can't see the number, so
yeah, that's why I just stopped it where you couldn't see the full thing. The reason I stopped you here, and I honestly figured that you would have more fun with cherubim and whatnot. I figured your Western accent was about to come out.
Oh no.
You've done it so many times in the past, I've just come to expect it now. That being said, it really felt like that's where it was going. That's why I wanted you to read this part. That's my fault. That being said, this also is a point in the favor of the more consensus view that this is talking about the Pope directly. I still think the ambiguity is intentionally placed there, since he has used the direct titles before now without poetic flourish. I think he did this intentionally, but that's just me, and a few more younger people today. What puppy? Um, um, but I'm also going to point out the fact that, as he points out, that Francis came after. This is wiggle worm. Chill. Okay.
Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.
Yeah, I keep trying to hold her so she won't fall, and she keeps trying to kick my hand because she's being a little butt. Say hi to the audience, Barbie. Hi. You're probably the only reason they'll start showing up now. I'll have to get you a puppy cam. But it is also the particular sin that they're talking about here. It is mentioned as a possible outcome. There's a couple of different ones that are mentioned. The sin that he was pushed into by the Pope, according to the commentaries. But as we pointed out when it was first brought up, he's here for like fraudulent advice he gave the Pope. So whatever sin the Pope put him into, he is essentially blaming that for his being here, and therefore cementing his contrapasso, not willing to admit his own fault, and that it is his fraud that has him here, not the sin the Pope pushed him into in the first place that led him to said fraud.
Yeah, I mean, that seems.
Oh, I figured Rich would have been on that one since he's the contrapasso man here.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out how this fits in with some other things that we've talked about in the past, and also I had to go take care of some puppy things.
Yeah.
My mind made it
so
Rich
She
too.
figured out how to open doors.
yeah. So
do
one
you
of
have
the,
do you have lever handles?
Yeah.
Well, time to go to Home Depot and get twist handles.
Yeah.
one of the summaries, I think it's Musa, of the entire Canto, mentions, after giving the name, saying he was untrue to his vows when at the urging of Pope Boniface VIII, he counseled the use of fraud in the Pope's campaign against the Colonna family. He was damned to hell because he failed to repent his sins, trusting instead in the Pope's fraudulent absolution. So he advised the Pope to lie when the Pope was going after the Colonna family, and instead of actually repenting for that sin, he thought the Pope's absolution would be sufficient. He was wrong.
Well, considering the way that, at least according to Catholic teachings, Dante's technically wrong here. We'll just let that slide.
Well, no,
I
that's
mean,
Musa's,
this is not the first time Dante has gone against Catholic dogma.
No, I know that, but that's why it was a minor point just to bring it up. But yeah,
but Musa
you are
seems
right.
to be trying to address this, right? Because I think that's why he talks about Ulysses. I think the reason why he wants to say that Ulysses was not fraudulent is so that he can then say if it's possible for Ulysses to be there for some other sin besides fraud, then it's possible for Guido as well. And who knows, like maybe maybe the intent was, oh yeah, you were absolved for that, right? But the fact that you had this corrupt intent in getting the absolution, you weren't absolved for that. And it's that corrupt intent that.
Yeah, and here's the thing.
It seems to be what Musa's
and
implying.
here's the thing. As far as I can read into this and the Italian, which I could pretty much only like break into its Latin roots, Musa is probably accurate in this as far as like trying to apply like logical sense to like this poetry, because I mean this is being done in a very poetic form, so like it's not like it's specifically not finite like that. With logic applied, I think Musa is the most accurate. But if we are going by what Dante wrote, and this is supposed to be about the fraud, it's not that, let's say the Pope did absolve him of that sin. Um, the sin itself can't be absolved by a Pope who was making you commit that sin. That's the whole thing. It is what I'm interpreting from the wording here is that the friar views it as the Pope pushed him into doing this, made him become the sinner that he is, as opposed to the fraud being the sin. And Dante the author, is judging him on the fraud that he never truly repented for, because that absolution can't be given from a fraudulent Pope, a Pope who is driving his people into sin.
The absolution itself would be fraudulent.
Yes.
And that seems to be what's being argued in 112 through 120. Because Francis comes down to get him. Francis is like, St. Francis is like, hey, it's time to bring you to heaven or whatever. And that's when the black cherubim, this kind of reminds me of the Eumenides, the trial with where it's the Furies versus Apollo, making the same sort of an argument right here, right? And so it seems that St. Francis is the defense attorney in that analogy, and the black cherubim are the prosecution, and they win that argument. And they make that argument 115 through 120. They make the argument as to why he can't go to heaven.
And that's kind of my point. Which
is interesting. Like, they beat St. Francis.
Well, don't get me wrong. St. Francis, as his myth entails, is a very good and gentle soul. I wouldn't put that as the best defense attorney. Just saying. Like, if I want a defense attorney, I want my Johnny Cochran. I don't want St. Francis. Just saying.
But yeah, I thought that was interesting that there's actually a battle over his soul, and hell wins.
Well, and that is to, at least in my eyes, and this is putting my Catholic hat back on to pull a trope from Matt Dillahunty. That is Dante implying that the Pope doesn't make the decision; God does. It is the essentially the main abstraction argument that he has made, the true heresy in this that he has said multiple times in multiple ways, is that the church isn't the final answer.
Or there's exceptions to when there's rules to when the keys can be used, I guess.
Yeah.
Is what which is
and the final answer
definitely
is
not
those keys are entrusted to the Pope and the church, but they actually are held by who? Who is the ruler of hell in the end?
At the end?
The ruler of hell?
No, because you're thinking of the tormentor of hell. No, the person who actually holds the keys is Jesus. At the end.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, he gives the keys to Peter.
Yeah, but that's the entrusted that's entrusting until his return. The end implies that part there, Rich. That's kind of my point. He's entrusted with the keys until Jesus' return. That's the whole point.
I'm going to create a graphic for this because this debate fascinates me. This little court trial.
Honestly, what I'd love to do is, and I didn't because I was looking into the other stuff about the papal seats and things like that, because I wanted to see if the people I was reading had any point to what they were saying. And it seems at least semi-valid because it was not univocal he would understand it was not univocal at that time, and he could have used it non-univocal. We'll never know if that was intentional. But um, I'd want to look up. I'd be willing to bet there's probably some playwright, and maybe our theater friend Despy here can help us, who may have done a play around this or like a short type of thing around this particular trial of Francis versus the Black Cherubim. Because it'd be interesting. We might be able to like actually like watch this like performed, and if somebody did that, because I know they did that with like Faust.
Actually,
did
that's
that
going to be
with
my
other
first
stuff.
question that I ask Sean. By the way, he said he would give us his prezzies because he teaches Dante every year.
Oh, cool.
So that'll be interesting.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
super curious about the trial of Guido now.
Well, yeah, and it'd be very interesting because with him, with his level of scholarship, I mean, we're all fucking, essentially lay people. We're far above most lay people, but we're definitely not scholars of our own right. It'd be interesting the other nuances that he might bring in, especially if these because as we were talking last night, it appears he's either teaching at a Lutheran college or is Lutheran himself at
Oh
this
no, that's
point.
not Sean. That's Francis. But
Oh,
Sean is an
my
English
confusion.
at St. Mary's University, and he went to Oxford for grad school, and I think
Oh, cool.
another. And
Yeah,
then he
you
came
did
back to
mention him, but we talked about your other friend more.
yeah,
That was where my
right,
confusion
yeah,
came
yeah,
in.
yeah.
Okay,
But I
yeah.
mean, yeah, I would. This is the friend I would expect to know more about Dante.
Well, I would expect the former Catholic and now potentially Lutheran seminary teacher to have his own rather unique perspective on this from the theological side. That would also be interesting, which is why I was hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
your
no, he'd
English
be good for
professor
that.
friend will be good as well, because then we will get like secondary literary interpretations that I don't have
He's
access
also no
to.
slouch
You
on Catholic.
know, I'm looking at this at exactly what the cherubim is saying. It
Oh, hold
reminds me of Les Mis.
on. I could see that. I don't know who Javert would be in this, but I get what you. I get the inspiration that you're talking about here.
Yeah, I would say, what is it? Javert would be the cherubim.
Yeah,
I mean, could be. I mean, but that's my point.
He
Is
must come down among my servitors because he gave the fraudulent advice,
well,
because
but
he sinned.
but Javert is going after somebody for something that was minuscule, unimportant. It was a petty event. That's why I'm saying, like, the cherubim might fit that, but I don't think that would be how. I mean, obviously Dante would have viewed it like that, but like maybe the author of Les Mis saw the black cherubim as unjust in what they said. Hey, I could see that.
Mhm.
well,
Yeah.
see, I can see why everybody loves this canto, because this is a very like dissenting theological argument, and he's basically this one line 119 is clinches it for me. Nor can one both repent and will at once. So we had this conversation about confession, about the seal of confession specifically, right? About whether or not priests can like turn somebody in or whatever seal of confession. My argument was that they should, because if someone is telling you something that they're going to do, this was the scenario we were talking about at the time, that they're telling you something that they're going to do, not something that in the past, then at that point it's not really a confession, and so there's no seal. And at least that was my argument at the time. And
Hmm.
here, the cherubim seem to be making that argument. Like, no,
Hmm.
you can, get forgiveness for something that you've done in the past, but you can't like be forgiven in advance. It doesn't work. And so the keys are not operative in this scenario because of that.
Yeah,
And that
because
is not a
those key.
limitation that comes from the Bible.
No,
That's
no, it's one that comes
so.
from doctrine. Yeah.
So, well, I'm saying this. I don't think this is a limitation in doctrine even today.
Oh, no,
I
no.
think.
If you are lying, which only God will know. If you are lying during your confession that you are repentant, if
Yeah.
you are just going through the motions, the absolution means nothing. Like, no,
But if
this
the
is
sin has not
doctrine.
yet happened,
This is no.
this
This is
okay.
what
Here's
would
what it
apply
is.
to the Crusaders, and if you remember, JP2 fucking talked about that.
Here's what it is. I think this is how it works. Is that the keys? It's not that the keys didn't work. It's that the keys were used too soon. And then when the sin happens, he was never absolved afterwards for it.
Well, you
But
cannot be
had he done it
absolved.
the other had he done it the other way, it would have been just as corrupt, right? But if he had done it the other way and has absolved him afterwards, then it
No,
still would have been
because
corrupt,
you
but it would have
cannot
worked
both repent and will at once. It's the point
at
is you
once.
can't have that
They have to
ambiguity.
happen at different times. Yeah.
No, but if you the whole thing is if your mind never changes. Let's say it's you're still
Yeah.
talking about something in the past, but you don't repent. You are not regretful. You are not repentant of it. That absolution means nothing, even if you asked for it. If you do not actually mean the request, that's the whole point. That is doctrinal canon law. Like the
Yeah.
only thing is nobody will know but God
Yeah,
and
that's
you.
true. But then you have the next line that says, because of the contradiction which does not consent. And that one actually, Longfellow is actually more literal in his translation.
Which consents not, but yeah.
Yes, well, I mean, yeah, word order doesn't mean as much in Italian, but yeah, if you do
Well, no,
not
I was just
consent,
reading off the screen from
oh yeah,
Longfellow
yeah,
because that's what people can see what we're see what we're talking
yeah, yeah,
about.
it's line 120. Musa and Sayers give the contradiction bars the false conclusion. At once they cancel each other out, but really it's there's no consent in that contradiction.
Yes,
So
because what you were doing is a built upon a lie, falsehood, a false premises, and that's where the canon law comes in.
and
And this
that
was,
is
by the
Catholic
way,
doctrine, right?
for any of those of you in the audience who are not Catholic and are just students, what we are talking about is something that was put into the Catholic Church around the 6th century. So many, 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 many years before the time period we're talking about. This was not a new concept to anyone at this point.
Well, you see this is interesting because Sedevacantists will tell you that that well, actually, everyone will tell you.
Sorry, 7th
Anyone
century, 600s, 7th century. My bad.
will tell you that the Holy Spirit. This is how they lay claim to their infallibility. Is that even if a corrupt pope wanted to say something that was not true or whatever using the keys, like the Holy Spirit would like prevent that from happening. And so
Well,
this is
prevent it from holding true on earth as it is, or on heaven as it is on earth.
you'll prevent it from being held true in either world, right? Because they have
Yeah.
to be harmonized according to the
Mm-hmm.
doctrine. But so I do think that Dante has an interest in preserving that. I think that
Oh, I do too. Which is why I think he says this person stays in hell because the throne is entrusted. It is not actually rulership.
he's creating a mechanism in a way that preserves the keys, right, but doesn't excuse the ways
The
in which they were
popes.
misused.
Yeah. And
I think that's super interesting.
now don't get me wrong. You know my view on harmonizations. This one is the most logical understanding of how that would work if any
but
of this
also
is true.
harmonizations happen, right? Like we have to.
No. But that's what I mean. This is
acknowledge
the most. If all of this, because when you look at a harmonization, you kind of have to a point, presuppose the end result is true. If all of this is true, this is the one that makes the most logical sense. That because of the way the promises were made, those things that they do that aren't actually in keeping with the sacred promises would not actually be honored by the deity. And so like that is what he is doing here is he's going, yeah, but it's he who decides, not this shithead in the gold hat. That's what and that, at least logically, if all of it is true, that is what makes the most sense.
He actually did send me his prezzies. I have them here, so I'll have to go through
Hmm.
them. But I'm going to ask him about this.
I would, because he's
Yeah.
going to have as an English professor, he's going to have even different interpretations than we do that he can pull from, where he could be like, well, no, I think Dante was pulling from this hermeneutic, etc., etc. So I'd be very interested in looking at that. Ugh. And I will let either Ancom or Rich finish us out with the last little bit from 124 to the end.
All right. Here we go. He bore me unto Minos, who entwined 8 times his tail about his stubborn back, and after he had bitten it in great rage, said, Of the thievish fire a culprit this, wherefore here where thou seest am I lost. Invested thus in going, I bemoan me. When it had thus completed its recital, the flames departed, uttering lamentations, writhing and flapping its sharp-pointed horn. Onward we passed, both I and my conductor, up o'er the crag above another arch, which the moat covers, where is paid the fee by those who, sowing discord, win their burden.
Yeah. Now, this one is obviously a pretty obvious fucking interpretation we can do here. He's giving us very visual cues as to what's happening. This is going less into any kind of like scholarly interpretation or scriptural interpretation or even cultural interpretation. This is quite literally, let's give you some eldritch horror before we end the canto, as we're wont to do as Alighieri. Let's just make your psyche a little bit freaked out for what's about to come next on the next page. And you guys should be honored. I gave away both of my lament and my lamentation this week.
Yeah. I was surprised you didn't take it.
No, because like honestly, like as much as I do like the joke of it, there are times when the flow is better just to keep going in our kind of like round robin style rather than try and force it.
So
I did that one week and it felt weird when I was trying to rewatch it to like cut stuff for the podcast thing, and sometimes I'm trying to get all that ready, and I was like, that felt off.
So this is also line 124 is another topographical update.
Mhm.
He held me off to Minos 8 times round, which is apparently means we're in the 8th circle now. And we haven't changed circles in a long time.
because
we've been going through all the bulges in the 8th circle.
Well, and the bulges in the 7th circle, but yes. That's kind of my point. Is like, and we talked about this. I think it was week 17, week 16, that this was going to start happening. That this was no longer going to be a quick procession of we're going to go through like like 1 or 2 cantos a circle and then we're gone. This was going to start stretching. Oh. Because like there was a little while there where it was almost 1 circle a canto. Like this is a very, I think that's intentional. I can't say for certain. We'll never be able to say for certain. But
we've got 7 cantos left.
With this 3 or 6. 6 will finish out. 7 will put us into 7 will be the first in Paradiso.
Oh. I thought there were 34 cantos.
No, Purgatorio.
Not Purgatorio. That was my misspeak. It will be the first into Purgatorio.
My understanding is I've always thought of it as Canto 1 being, even though Canto 1 is in the Inferno, technically it should be its own thing. And then it's Cantos 2 through 34, which is how you get 33 for each of the canticles. But
and I've always viewed 33 and 34 as a transitional like pair. Like
they are transitional. It's like
And
It's
that's
in the
and part of it to start touching it, and that's kind of my point. Like they do a minor overlap because of the poetic wording that is used at each intersection, and I think that is just because it's like a beautiful way to like do the juxtaposition as you are changing things. Like I don't think it's anything deeper than like it's just a beautiful way to do the transition, that is like natural and flowing for people. Like, oh, I just left that place, I'm still thinking about it type thing. And I think that's pretty much what it is here as well. Is it's just that kind of like natural progression that he is trying to give us. And that's why I view each of the bookend pairs for Inferno and Purgatorio and Paradiso as like those are their own thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird. At least in my opinion, that's the way it should be read. If you buy just the Inferno, you're getting up to Canto 34. Like, there's just no ifs, ands, or
right.
buts about it. Like, if you go in the store and buy this, but this isn't the Inferno. This is the whole comedy, which is why I did it this way. Because I found it interesting that since, and this was when I was researching when we were getting started, since 1987, it has been more common to teach the whole comedy than just the Inferno, and I have no fucking idea why.
Oh, interesting. He's got two divisions: Dante's Commedia, Inferno 1 through 5, and then the rest of Inferno. That's how he divides it.
Well, I can't say it's not arbitrary, but I also can kind of understand it
I'm
because,
sure
like,
he'll
the
explain
first.
at some point. Yeah.
Well, but I can also kind of understand it because the first five, you're going through like so much world building, so much character building because you're building the character of Dante and the narrator of Dante, the character of Virgil, and the author. Like all of these voices are being built in those first five. I could kind of see why you would do it, but I don't know if the first five are necessarily where I would cut it off. Like, I don't know. That's just, it seems arbitrary to do just five.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll see. Maybe I don't know. I'm sure he thinks the first five are so important in terms of like framing the poem.
Now, I will point out before we like get too far off into our tangents, going back to the text. Um, this is again a juxtaposition of the Greek underworld myth being pulled into Catholic, mythology. Because again, he uses a very particular phrase here, and it does not. It's not exact in the Greek to the Italian either, or the Italian to the English, but it is there. The concept of this is the moat where the fee is paid. The whole idea of crossing the river Styx, paying the ferryman for crossing. It is rejuxtaposed in here, because this is something that has not been in Catholic teaching for a very long time. We have some evidence of early Christian or early Christendom in like the 3rd and 4th century, where they would still put like coins and things and burials and stuff like that, kind of reminiscent of the old Hellenistic religions. But that has not been the norm in Catholicism for centuries at this point. So at least my interpretation of him doing this is him pulling not from Catholic history, because he would not have been taught this as history. This is him pulling from the Hellenistic mythology of Virgil and the other Greek classics that he read, that he had access to, I
And
should
just
say.
because the coins were mentioned to dissuade people of a common misunderstanding, the coins were put in the mouth, not over the eyes.
Coins were put over the eyes in certain districts in Rome, not in Greece. But yes, other than that,
Yes.
correct. So it is historical that gold coins were put over
Yes.
the eyes, but not if you're in Greece.
But it's another
Well,
one of these Roman things that got like misbelieved to be Greek, such as Hercules instead of Heracles.
Yes.
Hercules.
uh, but like the coins over the eyes, at least as far as I remember, and this is a documentary I watched many years ago, so take this with the largest grain of salt. The only evidence of coins over the eyes in Greece was during the Roman conquering by Romans.
The practice was that the coins for the ferryman go in the mouth.
No, that part agreed. I'm saying the only evidence we have in
Yeah.
Greece was still Roman. It wasn't Greek. But that's from a documentary I watched many years ago. Fuck, for all I know, they're full of shit. But it makes sense to me because I knew this as well, that it originally went into the mouth, because that is I forget the exact the supernatural second reason why it had to go in the mouth, but I think it had to do with that was the only way you could transport it across the barrier, because you lost your sword, you lost your armor, you were usually given new clothes in the underworld, and the thing in your mouth was the only thing that you carried with you. And if you didn't have your
Makes
coins,
sense.
you only had your word. I don't remember the supernatural reasoning behind it, but I do remember that the other parts happened as well. So,
Well, I think it might have also had something to do with, like, as soon as you show up in the underworld, you are immediately greeted by the ferryman asking for payment, and so when you go to speak, coin falls out of your mouth.
and that would again make perfect sense to me as well. I'd have to dig into the supernatural reasoning that they came up with, because that changed over time as well. The Hellenistic religions held sway over this area of the world for a very long time. Fucking a very long time.
So I
What's up,
called
Rich?
this thing the trial of Guido,
Mhm.
but apparently it's referred to as the psychomachia, the battle over the soul between the angel and the devil.
Okay. And what is his little blurb at his teaching thing say?
He
Since
hasn't. No, he. I don't think actually that now that I read further his explanations, I think he's got more detailed presentations on Purgatorio, and not so much. I think he was sort of
interesting.
giving a bird's eye view of the Inferno, because what he actually teaches in that course is
Purgatorio.
Purgatorio,
Okay.
not
I mean,
Inferno, which I think is
I'm not going to complain. That's going to
because
help us
everyone
coming
reads
up.
Inferno in college, right? So
Well, that helps us for what we're about to be coming up to,
yeah.
because commentary on Purgatorio is sadly lacking in English. We're going to be like outside of like the commentaries we're already using, like outside sources. Like we're going to be clicking that translate to English button on Google a lot. Like at least for what I saw on the reading list in most of these syllabi.
This framing highlights Dante's critique of legalistic loopholes in church practice, especially indulgences and corrupt absolutions.
Yeah, checks out.
Yeah, and I mean, as we pointed out, the harmonization here that he is doing, the minor amount of apologetics that Dante is doing here, is that the Pope is not the authority. He is the one entrusted, and sometimes that trust is broken. Hence why I put 3 of these cunts in hell.
Makes sense.
Now I'm being extremely hyperbolic and vulgar about it, because it's kind of the point. Like, he is literally putting these people in, the damnation for eternity, that for their crimes of using the church for their own gain or their own nefarious purposes.
Jack being hyperbolic? Say it ain't so.
Hey, I'm generally not, at least not without the caveat.
What?
At least not without the caveats.
What? No.
No, but this is the final line in this one. This, at least in my opinion, is probably like when he shifts, even though we have left the voice of the friar for several lines at this point, and Ancom can see what I'm talking about in the Italian. This is where he shifts back away from that more ecclesiastical Latin. It is almost like it, going back to what we talked about earlier in the episode. It is almost like he had Dante and Virgil in the story code shift as well when around the friar. As you are wont to do when you're standing in front of your priest or your preacher. You don't talk exactly the same, do you?
No.
At least that's what I don't think it's, again, I think this is one of those subconscious things, and we'll never really know if this was intentional or unintentional, but that's what this feels like to me, is because the final line reads more like an everyman thing as opposed to the ecclesiastical Latin interpreted Italian that I see above it, because again I see more proper verbiage, more proper syntactical structure and grammatical structure despite being in poetical form, which means he had to almost be intentionally making that choice to switch to that, because he doesn't use that through the whole of the comedy. He only uses that at certain times and only around clergy, or when clergy are speaking.
Like I'm looking at this and I see when Guido's speaking, it's very formal language, and then when you switch back to, in this case, Dante the narrator, he's using more common language.
Yeah. And like I said, I can't say it's intentional. I would be shocked if it wasn't, because of the way that Dante has operated throughout this poem. But it could have just as easily have been the code switching that we were discussing earlier. This one now extrapolated to the more commonplace with anybody who might be a churchgoer in our audience. Which I'm sorry for the jokes we make, but they're going to happen. Sorry, deal with it. But at the same time, you code switch around your preacher. You code switch. Like, I have religious
sorry,
family.
not sorry.
Yeah. Like, I have religious family members, and there are times when I will refuse to code switch. I will not allow their restrictions on language to be imposed upon me. There are other times I will. Like, I'm not going to disrespect their house and like just be a dick in their house and say, like say the things that I know they don't want said, like, goddamn, etc. I'm not going to do that in their house. If they say that to me in my house, they can get the fuck out. Like there's a certain level of code switching we even do within our families. I'm sure anybody in the audience, as we were talking about that, can now picture a time that they've done that with a family member themselves, whether they are religious or not. It's just one of those things that we do for different reasons all the time, and I think that's what he's doing here, at least in my opinion, intentionally. But it could just as easily be that incidental way we do it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it is something to think about, because when you are reading any of these classics, and when we get to the Analectics and Beowulf, I'm sorry, but you will see that this kind of like emotional and psychological interpretation of the author's potential intents is important, and I think that we should do it for just about anything. Because these mythologies, because that is what this is. This has become its own mythology, and that has actually been transposed into Catholic mythology. These mythologies, as they are created, are snapshots in time in a way to try and help people going forward, and you have to therefore understand the psychological impetus of why these people are doing these things. For Dante, he saw the corruption of the church and potentially would have lost his life because of the corruptions of that church in war. So he saw this not only firsthand, but he saw friends, family, neighbors die for these corruptions that he is describing and judging within these books. Go on, Despi, sorry.
Just as an example, like with Confucius, who Confucius is talking to is the most important part about what he's saying, because you will find out that he becomes sarcastic, facetious, and
he even goes sardonic at times.
and sometimes gives opposite advice depending on who he's talking to, and you have to know what his relationship is with that person to understand how he's giving advice.
And for a brief spoiler, every time he goes sardonic, he wants that person to die. Sorry.
Yep, pretty much.
I don't know why that particular voice changes the people that he wishes ill upon, but it is.
Well, the main thing is that he if you know historically, Confucius spent a lot of time in high courts, so he spent a lot of time around the hoity-toity, and there are certain people he just doesn't like being around.
Well, no,
That.
I understood the reason why he wished ill. I do not understand why in his analectics, some things he's sarcastic, something. I don't know why he chose sardonicism for "I wish you to die a painful and slow death." I don't understand that choice, and maybe when we go over it, you'll be able to help me with that part, because that's going to be cultural as opposed to personal relationship, probably.
Well, the thing to keep in mind is that Confucius never wrote down anything. It was his students who wrote it down. So this could be Confucius. This could be Confucius's feelings towards this person, or it could be somebody who was a student who thought Confucius had ill will towards a person that the student has ill will towards.
I didn't realize he never wrote. I knew it was mainly his students, but I thought some of it was his. Okay, that was
no. It's all written by his students. It's a collection.
It's a little bit like Socrates was only written down by Aristotle and Plato.
Now that part.
It's a little bit of a misunderstanding there, because Aristotle didn't. We don't have anything that Aristotle wrote. What we have are the notes from his students.
And we lost Socrates as well. Well, but we lost much of Socrates.
No, Aristotle was a student of Plato.
Yeah, we lost much of Socrates and Plato as well, but we don't know that they never wrote anything down. We just know that we don't have any record that's personally in their hand. We only have the words of their student. That is what survived the test of history. We don't know that they never. Yeah.
With Aristotle, what we're reading our class
because what's his name?
Really good classmate.
I can't remember the fucking Plato student right now. But there was a Plato student who says he's quoting Plato directly from something Plato wrote, which implies that Plato occasionally wrote shit down. We just don't have any access to any of it beyond what his students wrote down.
Yeah, it's the same with Aristotle. Like, apparently there were documents at one point which were 30 dialogues written by Aristotle, the Aristotelian dialogues. Those
we believe they were lost in the Library of Alexandria, if the myth is to be believed.
The rumor is that they, or at least the hope is that they're in the Library of Herculaneum, and that we might rediscover them.
Well, and
if we do, it'll be the first time we have something that Aristotle wrote, as opposed to.
Or at least direct copies of what he wrote that are people trying to preserve his words. Yeah, we don't know if they're
from his students, is what it is. Imagine, like, you heard about this great professor, and you find out that he died, and he didn't publish anything, and then going to his students and saying, "Hey, can you go dig up your class notes from when you took this class from that guy and give me that?" And that's what we have.
Well. And what we lost were his class notes, because he never published anything, or at least nothing that survived the test of time.
That's what I'm saying.
We are talking millennia here.
Yeah, I'm talking about his students' class notes.
Yeah.
I think when you're talking about like Chinese philosophy, I think Mencius wrote down things, but it was also stuff that his students wrote down at the same time. I think possibly even Lao Tzu.
Well,
it was Lao Tzu and students.
Remember, I have Westernified fucking education on this. It also could be the shit that I was taught was wrong. That's why I'm just like, okay, I'll just take you. actually went to school for this shit. I will take your word for it over documentaries I watched. Just saying. Like until you're proven wrong or proven unreliable, which anything I've ever looked up you've sent me has been accurate, so I had a reason to. That's my point. It's just like, it's just as easy that on the fucking Smithsonian or the History Channel, the person writing the script didn't understand what he was reading.
All I'm gonna say is that like one of the books that I've downloaded that was actually recommended to me by a professor who is
Yeah, the one you sent me for the Analects, yeah.
Yeah, who is a professor of 16th century Chinese poetry, and understanding the Analects is important to understanding 15th century poetry. But he's the one that referred me to a particular author who was like one of the most used authors for the Analects. And in the preface to where he's actually talking about it, he says that Confucius never wrote down his stuff and it was only his students.
No, here's the thing. I like I said, this is me going on documentaries because I am autodidactic in much of this stuff.
Mhm.
I can only read what I know to look up, and therefore, like, you can only follow link chains so far into scholarship until you start using things like Google Scholar, and then you have to know who to look up.
But it also makes sense because of how the Confucius method is taught. Like, traditionally, a guy literally stands up in front of everybody repeating things that they have memorized verbatim, and you sit there and write them down.
Yeah, I'm not going to use the racist name for the game, but it's a giant game of telephone. Yeah.
Right, but the thing is but instead of telephone, this is like, what is it, like stenographer?
Yeah, well, I will not use the racist name for it because even though it would not actually be TOS, I just find it too offensive to use. There is a old game that was played in much of the UK and places in Europe that it has the particular nationality in question, and then whispers as the name of it,
okay.
and it stems back to this. And our version of it, our non-racist name for that game, is telephone.
Okay.
Yeah, that is the history of like that game, like as it like traveled through history. Is basically it was people making fun of Asia because of the way that they did things, because they didn't have the books and the universities and the very Western Eurocentric superiority complex, view of things like they had, especially in the times of like Marco Polo, blah 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 blah. So like
right.
It's that shit carrying through, and that's why I don't like using that particular phrase for it, even though TOS wouldn't give a shit about it. For those of you in the audience, that's why I have an issue with it, is because it is complete nonsense. They are literally infantilizing a country that predated them by a fucking millennia. At this point, it was fucking asinine. It was one of those things that like when I learned that part of history, I was like, but all of the good stuff that you take credit for, you just stole from them. Yeah, fuck you. It's just fun. Like, the whole thing of boiling water to prevent disease comes from Asia. It comes from making tea. That whole move of boiling water to prevent disease comes from the concept of making tea with that water.
Mm-hmm.
They literally were... Now, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh my god, they were so advanced, they understood. No, they didn't understand this for shit. They just knew if you drank tea, you were less likely to get the runs. They didn't realize that they were killing bacteria when they were boiling the water. That they didn't understand that boiling the water when they made rice killed that stuff. That part was not understood to them. But that whole inculcated process that spread all around the world because of British tea traders, or the China traders as they were referred to, is because of those sailors who were dying of scurvy, dying of dysentery, dying of there's another D one that just slipped my brain. The dysphonia. That this practice of all their sailors drank tea, all their sailors wiped their ass with paper, and they learned this from the Chinese sailors that they traded opium, tea, and silver with, and brought that back to England, and that plethораted out through the trading ports after that, and that led around the world to less people getting sick, and later in I think it was the early 1900s or late 1800s, scientists started discovering this was actually the boiling of the water was killing they didn't call them, because they didn't have true microscopes at that time that could get super small, but the germs that they had a inkling existed at this point, because we didn't have a firm concept of the germ theory of disease yet. That's when they started to discover it, because they started to see the difference between people who drank out of a well and people who drank tea in England.
Yeah.
So on, so forth. So, like, there's a reason why I try to give the historical context to this, even though this is very off topic from Dante, because it ties back to it. Like, Dante himself actually does this. This is why if you go back and you watch the previous episodes, you will see me and Rich go back and forth on the humanism of Dante, and I've stopped mentioning it as much because it's just so much more obvious the deeper we go. The humanism that he shows here extends to all the other cultures that he mentions, including one, the heathen that he fucking loves, Virgil. Like, this is throughout every, when he mentions other cultures, even cultures he disagrees with, he tries to humanize them. And I think that's a very important note, because Dante was one of the first, not the first. Technically, this started like 80 years earlier than him, I have come to find out. But he is one of the most well-known. That person from 80 years earlier is a medieval poet, much like Dante is a transitional poet. So, like, this is something that we are seeing the birth and rise of. At this point, it would be called a form of sectarian humanism, but plethораting out into European thought again, and helping give birth to the Renaissance later. What are you giggling and smiling about?
No, someone had posted something that was pretty funny.
Oh, okay. Well, I was making sure it wasn't something I said that I'm about to get ripped apart. So, okay, we're good. But on that note, this has been Digital Dante, and I hope we will catch you again next week for Canto 28. Canto 28 is more fun, where there's going to be less commentary. It's a lot less tricky to read, so we're going to stumble over words a little bit less. And hopefully I'll either be able to get our friends Eucharist or Real Radham on, because the voices for next week would be great from Real Radham, and I would love to hear like the Protestant secondary interpretation from our good friend Eucharist. Until next week.
If their lies were spread, I'm a broken lighthouse on a hollow shore. Once a beacon, now shining no more. They sailed away, left me to roar. In an ocean of echoes, I'll forever pour. Now I stand, a sentinel of despair, a fractured beacon, my heart laid bare. مشيتي في الشلال القوم الذين اهدروه نجارات الياجب تنتظرك مهمرة سماوية تستحق انفللا مسافر ومجارتي حيث تتجاوز الحكاية ناتي لا نهاية لها إلا العبد تتقلب من خلال الحالات الثابتات وتتدفق تيارات جميلة وداعيا للكرة الأرضية قيادة التيار فالقصص المبهيات نطفو في اللا نهاية الداخليات سنجد مسائر بشرية نكمل الرحلة البعيدة في النجوم الحائجات نحن قدسنا الشروق في مهما كسيهاتي حيث تتكشف الألغازي كسوفة المسير الإلهي حيث تترسخ الرحلة الإكليليات دخول بصيرات لا تعد ولا تحصى حيث يتم سرد الحكايات التي لا حدود لها استكشاف هذه حرب ودان حيث تتكشف الأسرار المظلمات الخوض في أبد ستار حيث تتسع الأفق فكر رموز التجمعات الكروية الرحلة النهمية التي نمر بها استكشافات الأبدي والحكمة هلا نحيت في متناول اليد النزول إلى الغلاف المغناطيسي حكاية كونيات يجب فهمها الإبر يبرر الظواهر المنذرات يتلهم الأساطير رحلة سماوات عبر العوالم البطوليات أحلام مظلمات نكتسبوها رسم بياني يبرر المجارات البعيدات في شيء كرمز يطمعه روافيل لاستكشاف الدائمي تشبه شام اللواء اشتعلت في النيران يبرر الحدود العنصريات وانفتحت الآفاق تحت القماش الأسود تدور الأقطار السماويات تنفجر أبرار الفتى الهلال العمياء وتدور القصص الخالدات مغامر خيال له ظلام تتكشف الأحلام المرمية وفديس نجميات في الكون حيث تتماشى المغامرات يا حريق مثيلات في السيمفونيات السماويات حيث تحتمي الأحلام استكشاف العوالم التي لا تموت في In every cell, the code of life's contained. DNA's double helix where genes are framed. Adenine with thymine forms the first base pair. Cytosine with guanine locked in structure fair. But in transcription, thymine swapped with you. Uracil steps in when RNA's the cue. This message travels to ribosomes so proteins can be made. But mutations alter all in ways that can cascade. Point mutations cause the smallest change. A single nucleotide swapped within a range. Transition switched purine for guanine. Pyrimidine for the same. Transversion swap between them, disrupting the DNA's game. A silent mutation makes no change inside. The codon shifts, but the protein's right. In this sense, mutations one amino's replaced. A change in structure, it's no longer graced. Nonsense mutations bring an early stop, shortening the protein, making production drop. These changes may seem minor at first glance, but in proteins, even one can ruin the dance. Insertions or deletions cause a frame shift shock. One base gone or added, throwing off the block. The reading frame gets misaligned. Codon's now a jumbled sign. In larger scale, the genes may rearrange. Duplications, inversions vast and strange. Entire chromosomes can break and shift, causing syndromes where genes now freely drift. UV radiation, chemical interactions at play. Mutagens that scramble every other DNA. They break bonds, form lesions on the strand, causing errors the polymerase can't understand. But repair is nature's guiding hand. Proofreading enzymes work to mend the strand. Still some mutations slip through the gate, driving evolution's hand at predictable rate. Radiation, chemical interactions at play. Mutagens that scramble every other DNA. They break bonds, form lesions on the strand, causing errors the polymerase can't understand. But repair is nature's guiding hand. Proofreading enzymes work to mend the strand. Slip through the gate, driving evolution's hand at predictable rate. Whoa.
Yeah. If you don't do that, I don't know this true. I know this true. I know this true.
Shadows cast by twisted vines, a garden once lush, now entwined. I gave my trust a sacred sign, but they plucked the roses, left me blind. I'm a broken lighthouse on a barren shore, lost in the tempest, my light no more. They sailed away, left me to roar in the ocean of silence, forever I'll pour. A puppet on a marionette string, they danced me, made my heart sing. In their carnival they made me swing, but when the show ended they cut my string. I'm a broken lighthouse on a barren shore, lost in the tempest, my light no more. They sailed away, left me to roar in the ocean of silence, forever I'll pour. I was a treasure chest, pile of gold. They plundered my riches, my story untold. In the moonless night, my heart grew cold, a lonelier tale in silence untold. They took my dreams and spun them like thread, weaving tapestries where I bled. But when the loom stopped, they left me for dead. In the silken bolt of loneliness I tread. I'm a broken lighthouse on a barren shore, lost in the tempest, my light no more. They sailed away, left me to to silence forever I'll pour. Now I stand, a sentinel of despair. In solitude's kingdom I'm their heir. They took my trust, my heart laid bare. In the symphony of silence I'll find solace there.
Courage and might, apes with brains, hearts, and cosmic flair. The ship's the primate avenger, flying everywhere. Splitsy's on the tech with a spasm or two, and Shaolin's wisdom pulls the whole crew through. Swinging through the stars at the speed of light, Captain Simeon and his crew are ready for the fight. Apes, logs, call to arms, through galaxies far, they'll bring the charm. Gore's brute force smashes through the line, but he's got a heart that's genuinely kind. Spider's got his sights locked tight, with a trigger finger quick and a penchant for fight. Nebula lurks in the cosmic void, but Simeon's resolve just can't be destroyed. Swinging through the stars at the speed of light, Captain Simeon and his crew are ready for the fight. It's a call to arms, through galaxies far, they'll bring the charm. Gore's brute force smashes through the light, through the dark and the dark will race. Dr. Split's like quick, but he's never done. With science in hand, they always have fun. From nebulous traps to races to schemes, the space monkeys rise and shatter their dreams. Swinging through the stars at the speed of light, Captain Simeon and his crew are ready for the fight. There's a cosmic cheer through galaxies far, they'll bring the charm. Gore's brutal crew so brave, in the void of space it's adventure they crave. With Simeon leading and the space monkeys in tow, they'll keep the universe safe from nebulous dark glow. Echoes through the stars, Captain Simeon's legacy will forever be ours.
Yo, fuck the noise, let the city lights flash where the streets hit hard and we're kicking our ass. This ain't no place for this spineless shit. We outnumbered the bastards and we're done with it. Yo, fuck the noise, let the city lights flash when the streets hit hard and we're kicking their ass. This ain't no place for the spineless shit. We outnumber the bastards and we're done with it. The city's alive with that revolution. Fire while the ignorant fucks hang on to the choir. Bring your open mind, let's burn the night. We'll tear down their walls while we rise to new heights. Stand alone, now we got the crew. We're union strong, yeah, we roll deep too. Fuck stabby, that rat's got no bite. While we build it up, they lose the fight. You ain't bound to the rich, now fuck that noise. We'll try them out while we make our choice. Come to the city where the streets don't sleep, where the bastards tremble and the people leave. It's the home for the bold, where we fight and win, where the biggest grow, storm within. This ain't just a city, it's class warfare incarnate. Every street corner scream fuck the estate. No room for the sniveling bullshit lies. We'll grind them down, make them fry in its eyes. We're laying bricks with grit and spit. Each block screams you ain't stopping this shit. You think we're soft, now we strike hard, while the rich motherfuckers hide in their yard. They wave that flag while we're tearing it down. This city ain't theirs, it's ours to crown. Come to the city where the streets don't sleep, where the bastards tremble and the people leave. It's the home for the bold, where we fight and win, where the biggest grow, storm within. Stepping on us, now we're taking the throne. They'll bleed in the tower, shit the pants in fear, while we take the city back, time's drawing near. Solidarity ain't just a buzzword, it's a goddamn life. When you cut through the system with a fucking knife. They got the rats, but we got the battalion. Class warfare's here, we'll take the stallion. While we hide behind gates, tricking off their wealth, we'll tear through the ranks. Fuck their health, you think Stabby's the worst? Nah, he's a clown. We're the ones making them shit themselves down. The city breeds revolution, cunts like you don't last, get in the way and you'll be blown to the pop. Come to the city where the bastards tremble and the people lead. It's the home for the bold where we fight and win. Where the big